The clatter of hooves and the creaking of wheels broke the silence on the street. A luxurious carriage was rushing its passenger towards a new life. Am I really suitable? After all, the Dispenser family wants to see another daughter-in-law. The young girl with sun-colored hair was worried because she was about to get married. The lady sitting opposite calmed the girl down, assuring her that there could not be a better candidate. She seemed to be the perfect bride. But for whom? She didn't know. The carriage has arrived at its destination. It's time for a change. Just open the door. The butler announced the arrival of Lady Raina and Viscountess Evelay, and the girls found themselves at a huge estate with columns and a family coat of arms. The building was so gigantic that the girls standing at its porch seemed as small as toy figures. Raina stopped. Despite the invitation to follow her into the hall, the girl was in no hurry. In her delicate pink dress, she looked so fragile. Right from the doorway, the girl was greeted by young men, apparently the groom's brothers. They looked very friendly, and here he is. So handsome. A brunette with light blue eyes like the ocean in a blue festive suit. Felix, the eldest son of the family. However, the future newlyweds looked good together. But how did it happen that this family happiness went to this girl? A few days ago, the Homewood family. Raina returned home with bags full of groceries. The discussion about marriage was raging at home. Roxy's eldest daughter, Homewood, refused to marry Viscount. Father's head was already hurting. How tired he was of going through suitors and always getting the same answer. Well, it looks like Walter will have to find a place for his eldest daughter. Homewood find a family better. And it seemed there was one. But the look on Roxy's face, even before she read the letter with the proposal, was already clear. Raina held her breath, waiting for a pause in this seemingly endless conversation to announce her arrival. The mother burst into the room. She did not notice her youngest daughter and kicked her so hard that she almost fell. A pack of butter fell out of the package and almost hit the floor. Raina managed to catch it at the very last moment. Where is this noise coming from? The mother's commanding voice rang out like a clap of thunder. And here is the moment when Raina announced that she had returned home. Only at home, it seems. They were not very happy to see her. Countess Catherine Homewood told her youngest daughter to stay out of the way. She was more interested in the details of the marriage proposal, but the details were missing. The letter didn't say anything about what kind of girl they wanted to see. It's decided. They'll send Raina. It's unbelievable. The thought of marriage made the girl shudder so much that not only the pack of butter fell out, now the whole package was on the floor. Predatory glances pierced Raina. It seemed that her fate was being decided here and now. A letter arrived with a proposal of marriage from the Dispenser family. For this, the Homewood family was promised a lot of money. Hands and hearts? Lots of money? What's going on? Raina looked at her dad with bewilderment. Times change, aristocrats go bankrupt, titles are devalued due to lack of budget. Where there is demand, there is supply. Viscount Dispenser put forward his proposal. But the title has nothing to do with the opinion of society. It still needs to be earned. Nobility is an innate quality. The family that bought the title with money did not fit into society. In the end, to become real aristocrats, they ask for the hand of the Count's daughter. They ask for the hand of Raina. And they are not even interested in the appearance of the bride. Raina screamed so loudly that the crystal in the room shook. There was not enough money in the house even for food, so she was starving, but she continued to work as hard as she could. And in the end, they just wanted to get rid of the girl, like an unnecessary thing. It was so bitter for her to think about it, but suddenly the mother stood as a wall between the father and the youngest daughter. She protested that she would not give up her youngest daughter. Now Raina felt like a defenseless little girl. She so wanted her mother to protect her from this nightmare. If Raina left, she would have to hire a maid. The stern mother could not allow any extra expenses from the family budget. Raina mentally begged her mother to be angrier, so that she would have the final say and the girl would continue to do her duties at home. But the father unfolded the letter and thrust it almost under the mother's nose and asked her to read it more carefully, especially the numbers. The mother's eyes widened and sparkled with greed. 5,000 florins. That's the deal. You can live luxuriously for the rest of your life on that money. Like in the old days. Reading the letter, Catherine Homewood was already looking forward to buying new jewelry, dresses, and other attributes of a life of luxury. Hearing the phrase, sweet little daughter, Raina finally realized that there was no longer any hope that her parents would come to their senses. It seemed that Raina was obliged to go there and solve all the family's financial problems. The mother's voice thundered with a mixture of affection and hatred. The mother asked her daughter to be patient for the sake of the family. Otherwise, Raina would be selfish in her eyes. Tears glistened in Raina's eyes. The poor girl was shaking. She was scared to the point of goosebumps, and she didn't dare contradict her strict mother. And she certainly had nothing to say against such arguments. Raina's mother looked down on her. It seemed to her that her daughter always did everything wrong, and even now she did not want to agree to such a lucrative offer. The mother's new round of arguments was even more deadly. She demanded that her daughter repay her family for not abandoning her on the street and for becoming a useful child. A useful child. Oh, Raina had dreamed of hearing these words all her life. But now she was not at all happy. Closing the door right in front of Raina's nose, the mother did not miss the opportunity to load her daughter with new work. The next task for today was to cook dinner. From behind the closed doors, Roxy and her mother's voices could be heard. They were already discussing what dresses they would buy. And Raina felt so alone. That's it. Someone will have dresses, shoes, and jewelry. What a nightmare. And Raina will have a man. She couldn't stand it and burst into tears. There were no words left, only tears remained. Raina always felt like an outsider in this family. But now she realized that there is simply no place for her in this family. The girl sat on the floor, hugging her knees. She felt like the loneliest person in the world. From that day on, she was no longer part of this family. 1 week later, the Homewood family. Today, important guests arrived at the Homewood house. And today, at the Homewood house, the fate of Raina must be decided. Catherine Homewood invited the precious guests in. Today, she was in a great mood and seemed even a little less strict than usual. Dispenser family are, by the look of it, decent people. Blue-eyed brunettes, apparently brothers, and one very young child, obviously the youngest, and a girl in a blue dress. Welcome speech by Catherine Homewood, trying her best to appear friendly, sounded rather tiresome. But where is Maurice? Raina looked around in confusion. The girl in the blue dress introduced herself. Her name was Countess Dispenser, and she was grateful for the consent to this marriage. Should one bow in such a situation? Yes, Raina was from a respectable family, but she had never interacted with the nobility so closely, and she was very worried that she might not know the basic rules of etiquette. Catherine Homewood suggested Viscountess Dispenser to talk in private, probably to discuss a money matter. It's such a familiar feeling. Everyone around is having fun and chatting. It seems like no one would even notice if Raina suddenly disappeared. It turns out that they were simply selling the girl to the Dispenser family, and the wedding was just a formality. And it's not even clear who the husband is. If Raina said she went to them because Roxy wanted her to, that would make more sense. She'd obviously be mad if Raina didn't go and they had to call off the wedding. Catherine Homewood hugged the youngest daughter. It was so unexpected. But there was a chill in those embraces. The final instructions were for Raina to treat her new family with respect. Well, now go. Her mother's words sounded like a sentence, and her gaze was so cold that Raina caught herself thinking that she didn't really want to be in this house. Turning sharply, the mother hurried away with a very businesslike air, probably intending to count the money. The Dispenser family's servant, a gallant man in a black suit, offered Raina to carry her things, but the girl refused, clutching her suitcase with a death grip. Besides, if Raina left the house first, she would have a chance to escape. The girl looked around with a confused look. The thought of escaping was very tempting now, but Viscountess was already waiting for her at the porch. She offered Raina to choose what would be more comfortable for her to ride, a luxurious carriage or a new car. This family certainly didn't complain about a lack of money. Well, what young princess hasn't dreamed of having her own carriage? Raina pointed uncertainly at the horse-drawn carriage. Viscountess approved of the girl's choice. She also preferred the classic style. Eveille was always smiling. She gave the impression of a carefree and friendly person, unlike her own mother. And this won Raina over. She was almost no longer afraid. Well, maybe just a little bit. Maurice, the eldest son of the Homewood family, ran out onto the porch. He was simply glowing with joy. Paying no attention to his younger sister, Maurice began to examine the car. He was already dreaming of buying himself exactly the same one. And behind Raina stood a young man with a sad look. It seemed that he was even sadder than the girl herself. How he wanted to come up to Raina, hug her and calm her down. And he would definitely do it. But not now. Now he was embarrassed, and Raina was simply beautiful. She looked at the blue sky, thinking about a new life, and the wind, as if with an invisible hand, stroked her golden hair. Roxy gave her groom an appraising look. She decided that this guy was very attractive. It seemed like Roxy even started to regret a little that she had rejected his offer. In any case, it didn't concern Roxy. Now she had new, more important concerns. Ahead of Roxy, Homewood was destined for a life of luxury with expensive dresses, shoes, jewelry, and other things she loved so much. The parents had already counted the money, which was not easy, since the amount turned out to be even more than they had been promised, and they were literally dancing around the golden suitcase. But Raina was not in the mood for joy. Even a trip in a luxurious carriage could not dispel her sadness. The car, leaving the Homewood estate, was speeding down the road at cruising speed. The back seat was cramped, and for someone small and with tousled black hair, it was definitely uncomfortable. Dispenser brothers, as is customary among boys, joked and argued the whole way. At the moment, the youngest felt cramped, and the middle one did not understand why he had come with them at all. You. Shouldn't you be riding in the carriage? The younger directed his indignation at his older brother. You're as tall as a watchtower, and you never show emotion. You'd scare Lady Raina. The younger persisted. The middle one laughed. The squabbles between the brothers always amused him, but the one who wasn't amused was the eldest. And as soon as he showed his fist, the laughter that filled the car's interior died down. Well, how can I say calmed down? As soon as the older brother turned away, the laughter behind his back continued. His brothers were incorrigible, but now he was preoccupied with other thoughts about Raina. She looked so upset and embarrassed all the time. She was confused and didn't talk to anyone. She seemed to tremble from the slightest breath of wind, and her eyes were filled with fear. And yet, she was charming. Raina. Felix looked dreamily out the window. The new bride completely occupied all his thoughts. The Dispenser's lived-in was so huge that Raina felt like it could come to life and swallow her. The girls slowly walked up the steps of the estate. Raina's mouth dropped open in surprise. She had never seen such a big house before. It turned out that the Dispenser family estate is not one house, but 5. 3 large and 1 smaller, plus 4 towers and even a chapel. Raina felt a little downcast at the thought of how long it would take to clean all this luxury. However, in a wealthy family, she would hardly have to do the cleaning alone. All the members of the Dispenser family were already eagerly awaiting the bride, and Viscountess Evelay invited her in. Well, the girl also waited with trepidation to meet the new family. She was especially interested in her future husband, and she walked through the door that became the last obstacle between Raina and her new life. Despite the fact that the walls were black, the sun's rays bursting through the huge windows illuminated the entire room beautifully. Everything here is so expensive and shiny. Raina was afraid to take a step so as not to accidentally break something. But enough thinking about things. The most interesting thing was ahead. Meeting a new family. The head of the family introduced himself. His name was Alex, Dispenser, and he was the owner of the mansion. And opposite him stood he, the future husband. The father was clearly proud of his son. It was evident in his look. So handsome. His blue eyes with a greenish tint shimmered like sea waves. The groom's appearance definitely suited the girl's taste, but she couldn't say a word. She was so shy. For a second, their eyes met. The groom was also silent, but even if he was worried, he tried to hide it as best he could. And Raina looked away. She was so scared. Her fiancé might be handsome, but he was still a stranger, at least for now. A silent scene. The father looked at his eldest son, who looked at his bride, who was staring at the floor. Finally, the father smiled. He knew that the children were embarrassed. He had once been like that himself. It would pass with time. Felix's shoulder in support. It seemed that Raina was not the only one excited about the new acquaintance. The second eldest son was called Erden. He looked more positive than the eldest, and of course he did not have the burden of responsibility of an upcoming wedding hanging over him. His hair was the color of milk chocolate, and he preferred light colors in clothes. And finally, the youngest, his name was Joffrey. Judging by his hair, he had long since quarreled with his comb, but at the same time, he always wore a suit with a huge white bow tie. The girl was already acquainted with Evelay. Since all the family members had introduced themselves, Evelay invited them to sit down. The head of the family took the center seat, the sons occupied the sofas, and Raina chose the outermost seat, away from the newlywed groom and his father and closer to Evely, trying to suppress a panic attack, which was difficult to suppress because all these people were staring at her. Raina almost curled up into a ball like a little hedgehog. Evely's stern gaze made it clear to the men that their excessive attention was making the guest feel uncomfortable. Raina must have been very tired, so Evely decided to put off the long family stories for later and now briefly discuss the wedding ceremony. The wedding will take place in 2 years, and for now, Raina and Felix can consider themselves engaged. But why such a long time? Then there was no need to come right now. The ceremony was planned to be held in the family circle. From Evely's point of view, 2 years is the ideal time for young people to get to know each other better. This is a test, Raina realized. Of course. Before accepting a new girl, the family members must take a good look at her. Exactly. Raina decided that this was a test. And if she failed in her job, she would be thrown out of the mansion immediately. No way. The girl decided that she would try as hard as she could, because if she was kicked out of her second family in 2 years, she wouldn't survive it. The barely audible click of the lock indicated that Raina had gone to her new room. Evely told her to have a good rest. It's too long, Felix exploded. The eldest son had been silent all day, but now he seemed to have broken down. 6 months is the term Felix agrees to, at most 1 year, but 2 years is too long. The guy was perplexed by such a strange decision. The naive young man believed that the bride liked him from the start, but it was not that simple. Evely agreed to this wedding because it was the only decent way to take Raina away from her family. When his mother informed him that Raina had come to their estate against her will, Felix looked as if he had been doused with a bucket of cold water. He had no idea. Nobody wanted the wedding to happen before Raina fell in love with Felix. The guy thought about it. He didn't have to say it so directly. But this matter concerned only Countess Evely and Raina, and no one else. Evely closed her eyes and sank into warm memories. She remembered you as a little girl, that bright angel, her ringing laughter and golden hair. She played with children and radiated warmth like a little sun. But for some reason, Evely felt sad. She could only dream of having a daughter like her. And what a beautiful smile that girl had. At the sight of her, Evely's heart sank. It was Raina Homewood. Of course, Evely was happy that this girl would visit the shelter where she worked, but it also meant that she would spend little time with her parents. How she wanted to adopt her. Evely opened her eyes and smiled. Now Raina Homewood was under the roof of her house. Safe. Evely had high hopes that Raina would be happy here. The whole family wanted to talk to her, but Evely was worried that too much talk would not do the girl any good. But if not, if Raina is going to be happy here, then Evely's plan will have to be followed. Or if this girl doesn't remember anything at all about Felix, with whom she played as a child. Now the guy has to win her heart. Only Evely could talk to Raina, and this worried Alex because he also wanted to be friends with her. So he wrote a letter. Dear Raina, would you rather call me Dad or Papa? I would prefer the latter, but never call me Viscount. The letter read, In the warm embrace of soft pillows, in a cozy bed, a beautiful girl was sleeping. Yesterday was full of events, and she was resting. It's time to wake up. Good morning, Raina Homewood. What time is it? Why didn't the alarm go off? Mom will scold me. Looking around, the fog of memories gradually dissolved, and the girl began to remember what happened yesterday. Outside the window, the dawn was already turning pink. Raina was used to waking up when it was still dark, so she had overslept. The girl felt like she had slept so long for the first time since she was 12. She had a wonderful rest. But what would the new day bring her? The first thing to do in terms of Raina's usual schedule is to prepare breakfast for the whole family. Timidly opening the door to the kitchen, Raina first of all apologized for being late. The cook's surprised gaze pierced the girl. Was she really going to scold her? It turned out that the girl shouldn't be in the kitchen at all, and the only one who could be scolded for her presence here was the cook herself. This is the same girl the gentleman spoke of earlier. She had just arrived at the mansion, so the cook thought Raina had gotten lost. The cook surrounded Raina like a wall. The chef introduced herself. Her name was Marie. What do I need to do? Raina asked in a trembling voice. Now 4 surprised eyes were fixed on her. Raina knew how to bake bread and make stews. She was also a good cleaner. And she was just itching for a new assignment. Nothing needed to be done. Marie and her assistants handled all duties perfectly. But if Raina doesn't help, she will be kicked out. At least that's what she thought. And there was a cook's apron hanging on the wall nearby. It was time to show initiative. Greedily clutching the apron, the girl rushed to the table. Then she would find something to do herself. The cook's smiles were filled with affection. They were pleased that they had such a hard-working assistant. Eggs were breaking, dough was being kneaded, everything was literally flying around. Raina worked as deftly and quickly as a professional chef, and the kitchen table was already set. The head of the family arrived for dinner first and patiently waited for the others. Raina stood rooted to the spot at the entrance. She had already changed her kitchen apron for a dress as soft as the spring sky. Blue. Gentlemanliness has not been canceled, so the men, Felix had already arrived, invited the girl to the table. Felix kindly offered to take the seat next to him. After all, Raina is his future wife. She agreed. It was so unexpected because the girl was used to eating alone. Milk or tea, what would you like? Felix offered the girl to choose a drink while those present leisurely took their seats at the table. Milk, the girl said in a trembling voice. Before, she had no choice, since she had to eat and drink what was left after the meal was prepared. Felix just smiled and handed her a glass of milk. He seemed to feel more confident today than yesterday. Words of gratitude flowed from Raina's lips like a stormy river. Did this family really care about her gastronomic interests? So unusual. It was also unusual for the head of the family, since from his point of view, an ordinary glass of milk had never been worth such effusive gratitude. What is this? There was a dish on the table that was not originally on the menu for today. This is a delicious omelet that Raina made herself. But if no one wants to eat it, she certainly won't be offended. The head of the family's fork was already reaching for the dish. What would be his verdict? What if he didn't like Raina's cooking? Oh no. The nimble Joffrey got ahead of his father and was the first to snatch the biggest piece. Apparently, the phrase, "impudence is the second happiness," was his life motto. The father's indignant exclamations about family rules and table etiquette served as a perfect backdrop for wolfing down the delicious food. A few seconds later, the plate was empty. Only small crumbs reminded us that there had just been food in it. It was very tasty, simply delicious, and everyone agreed. Simply finger-licking good. A wide, sincere smile lit up the girl's face. She was not at all used to having her food praised, but here everyone was delighted, and only because she had made a small omelet. Next time, she would make more. No, said the head of the family. He could not allow the girl to cook for everyone. What do you mean, no? She cooked it herself, and it wasn't hard, and everyone liked it, but Alex is resisting. What a thing. However, it is not surprising. In her previous family, her cooking also quickly became boring. Walter Homewood, for example, hated eggs, and Morris considered the food prepared by his younger sister to be smelly. No need to cook if you don't want to. Alex smiled broadly. He hadn't brought the girl here for this, but he would really like her to cook something for his birthday. Of course. Raina would be happy to please the head of the family with festive baking on his birthday. She was ready to feed the whole world if only everyone would like it. Like just now. And mine too. You're not the only one who's cool, Dad. Joffrey also wanted Raina to give him her dish for his birthday. Joffrey always used the ruse that he was the youngest child because he knew it worked without fail, Raina said, and broke into a wide smile. It was the same beautiful, warm smile of that little girl that Evilly remembered. The hall became brighter and brighter as the sun rose higher and higher, its rays illuminating the room through the windows that were located right in the ceiling. Meanwhile, a casual family conversation flowed around the table. The head of the family was interested in how Felix was doing with Duke Cornell. Despite the fact that it was too early to talk about anything, he was interested in the process itself. Of course, if something went wrong, Felix would definitely say so. It was impossible not to notice that in the last few minutes, Felix's tone had become rougher and there was a resentment in his gaze. "Why are you angry?" the father asked, because the day had just begun and nothing bad had happened yet. Felix was angry because his wife cooked breakfast and he was the only one who didn't even try it. What a blatant injustice. Raina was sitting next to him. Of course, next time she would improve and prepare a personal breakfast for her future husband. Joffrey's first day of school was approaching, and his mother kept reminding him about it. The youngest son hadn't started school yet, but they already couldn't stand talking about it. Homewood family ate without saying a word. The table was silent. But these people didn't shut up. Raina was worried if she would ever be able to join in their conversation. The meal was over, and Eveling suggested that the girl go and rest a little. She had already worked hard since the morning. Yes, but what about cleaning? After all, she still needs to clear the table, sweep, and take out the trash. Well, if her work is not needed now, she will sit in her room until lunch. The girl had already turned to leave when Evele called her again. Evele had suggested earlier that they meet for a cup of tea at lunchtime. There were still many things she wanted to discuss with the new resident of her home. That feeling again. So unusual. In the old family, no one wanted to talk to Raina. And in the new one, she hadn't even left the room after breakfast when she was already being called for tea. Miracles. The invitation to tea was accepted with great pleasure, and the girl smiled again, her charming smile which Evele so liked. Raina bowed and disappeared through the door. There were still a few hours left before lunch, which she could use to better explore this huge estate. What about me? Joffrey pleaded. But no. Even though the younger son often went to tea ceremonies with his mother and had not yet really talked to Raina. But this was a women's meeting. Alex was the first to talk about accepting Raina into the family. There was nothing wrong with him wanting to have a daughter. The older he got, the more childish he became. Raina walked down the light-flooded corridor filled with a huge number of beautiful objects to the women's room, accompanied by a maid. The maid introduced herself. Her name was Jane. She had green hair and dark blue eyes, and her main duty was to look after Raina. If anything goes wrong, call me right away, the maid insisted. But what could go wrong? The girl always had everything under control, so there was no need to worry about her. However, so that the maid would not be offended, Raina promised to contact her if she needed anything. The door opened and Raina appeared in the doorway. She apologized for the sudden intrusion, despite having previously received an invitation to tea. Evele insisted that the girl help herself first, as she still had some things to settle. The desk was piled high with documents and other papers. A tea set for two was already prepared, and a delicious cake was offered as dessert. Raina took a sip of aromatic tea. She, in turn, was ready for a new round of questions. Eveline was interested in Raina's room. She didn't know what was fashionable among young girls, but she tried to please. However, Raina could steal it herself, as she wanted. The girl was all set, except that the closet seemed a little strange. Evele jumped up in a fit of panic. And indeed, from Evele's point of view, instead of a closet, there should be a dressing room. But there is too little space for it, so the room will probably have to be rebuilt. Oh no! It wasn't that the closet was small. It was just that there were too many things in it, as if it was someone else's room. The things were so beautiful, and Raina would have liked to wear some of them for a while too. It was a gift. Evele laughed. Every single thing belonged to Raina and only her, that the girl felt like she was still in a dream. Alex bought luxurious coats and outerwear. Felix gave me elegant things, and cute handbags and jewelry were from Joffrey. Everyone has their own preferences, and it is always interesting to know who prepared what. Raina's arrival, but she only thanked Evele. It was a bit unfair, but she will definitely improve. Thank you, Mom, Ryan whispered, and Evele felt her heart clench even more in room C at those words. These words made her heart ache. The adopted daughter she had dreamed of so much called her mom for the first time. Evele was now the happiest person in the world. Was the girl really welcome here? Raina wiped away the tears she couldn't hold back. She was also overwhelmed with happiness. Evele was curious about what her new adopted daughter would like to do in the future. Times have changed, and now girls also need to be able to live independently. Raina's terrible suspicions were confirmed. That's right. Will they throw her out of here in 2 years? Or does Evele mean that the girl needs to start preparing for expulsion now so that she can support herself, even if they don't want her in their mansion? The tea party continued, and the new mother was now interested in whether Raina had studied anything before. It turned out that the girl knew history quite well. Regarding Evele, she would like to study philosophy and psychology. But regarding Raina, Evelyn would like to teach her to draw or play a musical instrument first. We could go to museums and theaters together, that would be great. The boys were mostly uninterested in their mother's hobbies, but the daughter is a completely different matter. Raina suddenly drooped. She hung her head and could not utter a word in response. In fact, Raina doesn't have to study if she doesn't want to. Evele just wanted the girl to know the basics of science. Evele has made a lot of enemies lately. She took Raina's hands in her own. If the girl goes out into society without an education, she will be bullied and intimidated. Evele didn't ask for anything right now, but she wanted the girl to have experience and, most importantly, that she found what she loves. She agreed early. She wanted to get as much knowledge as possible. Raina will definitely think about it and choose subjects that are interesting. At this point, the tea ceremony was over. Evelyn was again worried that Raina might be tired, so she told her to go inside and rest a little more. Evelyn knew her situation and understood her pain. She had been watching Raina for a long time and therefore did not want the girl to feel uncomfortable. Raina sat on her bed and thought about her further education. There were so many interesting things in the world that she wanted to study, and it was very difficult to decide. Roxy had a private tutor, and Maurice went to the royal school. They were educated while Raina could only read. She was tired after hard work, and in her free time, she fell into bed like a stone and could only sleep. I wonder if it would be better if she read books instead of sleeping, but then she would clean the house worse and get scolded even more. And even if she could study, would she be able to catch up? The girl fell onto the bed and stared dreamily at the ceiling. Indeed, there was one thing in the world that interested her more than anything else. Slender fingers glided gracefully over the black and white keys, seemingly magically extracting from them the beautiful sounds of classical music. These amazing sounds of music filled the silent house whenever Roxy practiced the piano. Raina's favorite activity was cleaning during her older sister's music lessons. Only then did she feel light. Oh, how she wanted to learn to play the piano. Evening was approaching, and the pink rays of the setting sun, which had painted the walls of the estate in delicate colors, gradually gave way to the first stars. It was time for dinner. The maid knocked on the door to call Raina to dinner, but no one answered. But Raina couldn't say a word. She felt so weak that she couldn't even lift her hand, as if her body had turned into cotton wool, and her face was so hot, as if 100 suns were burning it. A few seconds later, the maid burst into the hall where the family had already gathered at the table to tell them the terrible news. "Raina is very ill," the maid screamed, her face distorted with horror. Evelyn immediately jumped up from her seat as if on alarm. Urgent action was needed. Joshua had to be called. A tearful Evelyn lamented in the arms of her loving husband, blaming herself for putting too much pressure on Raina while the doctor examined the ill girl. Joshua, the Dispenser family doctor. He was an experienced specialist. He had been treating the Dispenser family for many years, knew their medical histories by heart, but now, with Evelyn crying behind him, he felt a lot of pressure. Dr. Joshua had been driving all the way from home when he was called in the middle of dinner. He was told that the little lady was in a critical condition, and he thought he would have to live in 2 houses. On the way to the estate, Joshua accidentally learned about the upcoming wedding, but found it strange that no one invited him. Apparently, he was not the most welcome guest at the gala event. The doctor, as you were leaving the carriage, was about to say hello to Alex, but the head of the family, frightened by the loops, jumped out onto the threshold and pounced on Joshua like a hungry anaconda. Alex literally dragged the doctor into the house with a death grip. He ran so fast that the doctor almost fell trying to keep up with him. The stethoscope slowly slid over the girl's body in search of pathology, but no critical wheezing or other extraneous sounds were detected. The parents had been in shock for several hours, although the doctor had explained to them in detail that it was a simple cold. Evelyn could barely stand on her feet, so Alex was literally her reliable support at the moment. It's strange they didn't cry even when Eden was bleeding, but now there are only tears. Well, yes, a cold can be dangerous in some sense. After conducting an examination, palpation, percussion, and auscultation, as well as taking anamnesis, the doctor concluded that the girl's weight and the condition of her skin indicated a nutritional deficiency. He ordered that medications and nutritional supplements be sent the following day. Evelyn almost fainted. Help was rendered. Life was saved. That was the end of the doctor's work for the day. Besides, it was already late at night, so he got into the carriage and hurried to leave the estate. Raina's room. He quietly approached the bed and carefully moved the chair so as not to disturb the light sleep of the sleeping beauty. The fever had subsided. Now the girl was pale as a wall. She had fallen asleep and probably plunged into a dream world where there were no illnesses, no marriages of convenience, only her small and cozy world. It was Felix. He sat by the bed to guard his bride's sleep, and watching her sleep, he was lost in memories. The orphanage. 4 years ago. "Joffrey! Where are you, Joffrey?" Desperate cries filled the orchard. Apparently, someone was lost. The older brothers rushed around the orchard in confusion, looking for the younger one, but he seemed to have disappeared into thin air. And here he is. He fell epically from a tree and broke his knee. and next to him sat a blonde girl. It was Raina. She was the first to hear the crunch of breaking branches and the sounds of falling, and immediately rushed to help. You need to properly treat the wound, and everything will be fine. In fact, there is nothing serious here, just a regular bruise. It is enough to wash it, disinfect it, and apply a bandage. Help was rendered. Life was saved. Joffrey thanked the girl and stared at his knee, which she had just treated. Of course, after the iodine, it stung a little, but the boy did not cry at all. But his older brothers arrived. They thanked the girl for helping their clumsy younger brother, and thus the future bride and groom met for the first time. The girl asked if the young men knew this child, and if so, who they were to him. Oh yes, they knew him well. They came to the kindergarten as volunteers, and this little devil ran away. They searched for him for a long time, and she helped find him. And since Raina was there, they asked her to show them the way back. It turned out that while looking for Joffrey, the brothers took a wrong turn and ended up getting lost themselves. It happens to everyone. A warm summer day, the favorite weather of children who love playing in the open air. The sun's rays penetrated everywhere, only briefly lingering in the green crowns of the trees. They caressed the roof and wall of the orphanage, inside which Joffrey, who had fallen from a tree, was receiving treatment. The knee no longer hurt at all, and the boy was ready for new exploits. Raina's instructive lectures were not long in coming. If he were to volunteer in the future, he would have to be careful when going into the forest with the children. There were a lot of rocks there, and if you went too far, you could run into snakes. Joffrey ran away because he didn't want to do the tedious volunteer work. He wanted to go out and have fun with the other kids, but it seems his older brothers had other ideas. In the half-open door appeared two heads with big eyes and disheveled hair. The children were looking for Raina, who had disappeared from the yard so suddenly. The children asked Raina to play with them. They simply adored this kind and sympathetic girl, despite the fact that she was much better than all of them. Of course, she agreed. But she would join the children a little later, because right now she needed to put away the medicine. Despite the fact that he had recently fallen from a tree and got injured, Joffrey also wanted to play. He jumped out of bed full of strength and energy. The kids were running around the room like rabbits on the step. They almost knocked Eden off his feet, but he demonstrated miracles of balance and only because of this remained on his feet. One of the children approached Felix and looked up at him and invited him to join their cheerful and mischievous company. Naturally, Felix agreed. But at the same time, as it seemed to Raina, his smile did not look sincere, rather forced. Number Felix will help Raina put away the medicine. They will join later. The girl had already decided everything, despite the fact that Felix had no intention of helping her at all. But he was not against staying with Lana and helping her with her affairs. Now Felix was lying on the bed, and Raina had made him a cold compress and had already prepared a good harvest-lowering agent. The guy should feel better quickly, but how did she know that Felix was sick? The girl was very observant and sensitive, so it was not difficult for her to notice when a person was hiding pain. She also noticed that Felix's temperature had risen, as his cheeks suddenly turned red. By the way, Felix had never blushed before that moment. Help was rendered, life was saved. In half an hour, the medicine will take effect and Felix will become much better. Raina will tell the others that they placed the medicines together. The children's cutlets became louder and louder. The boys started a new game of tag and called Raina, who for some reason was very late. We changed the pictures here and there. Felix's soft blue eyes looked at the ceiling. The guy really did feel better. But it seemed to him that it wasn't because the drugs were working, but because Raina's warmth of soul was helping him. That same carefree and kind smile lit up Raina's face again like the summer sun. And she hurried into the yard to the children, but first promised that she would come and wake Felix in half an hour, and wished him sweet dreams. After that, something happened to Raina, and Felix was woken up by the abbess. The girl who had been fluttering around him a few hours ago was nowhere to be found. Felix visited the shelter many times, sometimes in the guise of sponsorship or service. And somehow, miraculously, he kept coming back to this place. Quite a while passed before he saw the girl again. She was still smiling carefree and carrying groceries for lunch. "Raina," Joffrey shouted excitedly. He was so happy to see his savior again, who had treated his knee after that painful fall from the tree. But the savior didn't say a word. She just stared at the brothers with an uncomprehending look, and a second later she nodded casually and went on about her business. Raina didn't recognize them. Had they offended the girl in some way and she didn't want to talk to them anymore? But no, it looked more like she had memory loss. Nothing. If Raina didn't recognize Joffrey, it meant he had grown up. But the younger brother's words sounded more like an attempt to console himself. Frankly, Felix was disappointed. But no matter whether Raina remembered him or not, her kindness to him had not changed. He vowed to do everything he could to repay her. Just think. Felix didn't even notice that Raina was sick. While she seemed to see right through him. The guy was deep in his thoughts when suddenly they were interrupted by the rustling of the bed. Raina opened her eyes. Her head still ached. The girl didn't remember when she fell asleep. Sure enough, she felt sick. She had never had a cold before. Oops, what's this? Felix leaned silently over his bride's bed. How long had he been sitting here? And more importantly, why? When Felix saw that the girl had woken up, he smiled tenderly and asked how she was feeling and if she needed anything. Felix's hand slowly reached for Raina's forehead. The fever was gone, which was good. In the caring hands of Felix and Joshua, the girl would quickly recover. For the first time in her life, Raina was being cared for by someone, so she was a little embarrassed. The girl was already impatient to get back to housework, but right now she was still too weak. What if Raina was hungry? Felix remembered the doctor's verdict about the girl's undernourishment and decided to bring her something from the kitchen. He would be back soon. With such long legs, Raina could have cooked herself some food, but Felix had already left. The girl was cold, and her dress was sticking to her body. Apparently, she had sweated a lot in her sleep. It was better to tidy herself up before Felix returned. Maybe he should bring her a glass of warm milk? Or perhaps a cup of black tea would perk her up better. Felix decided to go back and ask her what she preferred. Quietly, on tiptoe, so as not to wake the girl if she suddenly fell asleep again, Felix crept into her room. But there he saw something that almost made him faint. Raina stood with her back to the sun, her fragile shoulders exposed by the first rays of the rising sun. She was just changing and was wrapped in only a towel. She was beautiful, like an angel who had descended from heaven. Ah, 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 ah. Turning around and seeing Felix, Raina screamed so loudly and piercingly that the walls of the whole house shook. And why did she have to scream like that? Big deal. She wasn't naked. But her scream scared Felix even more, and roaring like a wounded bison, he flew out into the corridor like a fiery arrow. And the brothers were already there. "Brother, what have you done?" "You're finished," Eden stated. Joffrey was more emotional. He swore. "Did you really do this? Are you a pervert? The injection may cause a burning sensation. You need to endure it a little." The doctor arrived to see the new patient and gave instructions regarding further treatment, which consisted of the fact that even if the girl had already taken medication, she should always take it with her, but not take it on an empty stomach. Dr. Joshua spoke to the girl tenderly, as if she were a child. Despite the fact that she was almost healthy, the doctor insisted that her condition would have to be monitored. A golden tray appeared in the doorway in front of Evelyn. She was worried that Raina would not get bored in the room and squeezed some lemon juice for her, because vitamin C is good for the body. What a sweet lemon. Evelyn warmed up the lemon juice and mixed it with honey to make it easier to drink. It was delicious. Raina had been very ill for the last few days, but everyone was very kind to her. Alex, for example, recommended eating something high-calorie, preferably also sweet, to gain strength and energy. Eden, in turn, asked the girl to be as careful as possible and noted the positive dynamics of her recovery. Joffrey took it upon himself to make sure that Raina never regretted coming to their friendly family. And finally, Evelyn ordered that the girl would do absolutely nothing for the next few days, and if necessary, months. But Raina couldn't just sit still when everyone cared about her so much. She remembered the conversation about studying not long ago. Yes, she would do it. She would try her best to catch up. She was so ashamed that she didn't know anything, so Raina wanted to try, so she could be proud of herself in the future. Such enthusiasm is commendable, and Evelyn thanked the girl for her efforts, albeit future ones, noting once again that it is not at all necessary to strain too much. Health is more important. Flat Hill. Another day was gradually turning into night, and the estate, shrouded in the crimson tones of the sunset, was gradually plunging into darkness. Red wine was poured into a glass. He hadn't been home since that day. Felix knew it was business, but he would have to apologize to Raina when he got back. He couldn't believe he'd barged into her room without knocking. "Hey, Felix, when did you get back?" I heard you spent a lot of money. The voice belonged to the Duke of Cornwall, Lloyd Cornwall, and he wanted to know the details of the Dispenser family deal. Rumors spread very quickly. It seemed that those around him knew more details about Felix's engagement than he did. For example, he did not suspect that the girl had come to his estate against her will, and now one could only guess how much money her parents had paid for her. Although it would be strange if rumors did not start spreading after such a large deal, especially since Homewood spent money left and right with great pleasure and did not deny themselves anything. Homewood aristocrats was always close to bankruptcy, as the spouses of this family were generously endowed with greed, stupidity, and avarice. In addition, the eldest son, Maurice Homewood, is the stupidest of all fools, without a drop of sympathy or compassion. The only one who was worth even the slightest attention was Roxy Homewood. She always looked gorgeous, but she treated Raina with disdain and had no mercy for the people around her. Of all the debutantes, she is the least known about. Lloyd's caustic jokes Cornwall was not long in coming. He tried to joke that the bride price was too much for the Dispenser family. Although Dispenser had spent a lot of money, Felix was in no hurry to go to his bride, and Lloyd assumed that something had happened, for example, with his male health. It was obvious that Felix wasn't going to tell anyone anything about his new wife. But when Lloyd asked if he had quit his job, Felix pretended not to know what he was talking about. But Lloyd was persistent and threatened that it would not be difficult for him to find out everything on his own. After all, there were too many rumors about the engagement. Felix's expression was darker than the blackest night. He tried his best not to show his growing irritation. What do you find out? A tall blonde man dressed in a snow-white cloak appeared behind the friends' backs. Aaron, Lloyd's best friend, arrived. He was a little late, and now he was wondering what his friends had been talking about while he was gone. Aaron suggested his friend stop harassing Felix, but Lloyd brushed it off. He loved teasing his buddy. Since the Royal Academy, Aaron followed Lloyd around, has been stalking him since the first day of admission. The guys quickly became best friends. Handsome, well-mannered, educated, talented, head of the advanced department of the Royal Academy. Although at first glance it seems frightening, but if all the daughters of the world knew about such a treasure, there would be an ocean of tears. Sarcasm towards Felix has always been the main weapon of Lloyd and Aaron, and this cheerful couple never missed an opportunity to make sarcastic remarks about Felix. They simply burst into laughter, coming up with new epithets about his impeccability. Felix's patience ran out. He went outside for a night walk. Now he wanted to break away from the company that was clearly not to his liking and be alone with his thoughts, flowed from Evelaine's lips. Raina had begun learning to draw and had just completed her first painting. Her new mother seemed delighted. The painting was summer, with flowers, blue sky, white stone castle in the distance. Evelaine wanted it for herself, but decided to give it to her husband. He loved sunny days like the ones on this canvas. The next painting will be even better, and Raina will dedicate it to her new mother. She was already impatient to pick up the brush and palette again to paint an autumn landscape. Based on drawings by Raina Evelaine, concluded that the Homewood family had a strong influence, but now she wanted to discuss not painting, but another, more personal topic. Something happened between Raina and Felix. Evelaine realized it because the eldest son still hasn't returned, which means they can't announce their engagement. No. No one was arguing. Raina felt both awkward and funny remembering that morning when he had entered her room without knocking at the very moment when she was changing. But they had not seen each other since then. Was he really that offended by her reaction? The engagement has not yet been set, but despite this, Evelaine asked Raina to remember that she is still a dispenser. Now she has finally become part of their family. And since Raina has joined a new family, Evelaine decided to give her a gift. It is not known when the engagement will take place, so she gave it now. It was something very valuable, because even the box looked expensive. Raina felt awkward. She felt uncomfortable accepting another gift, since she had already been given so much. But if she refused, she would offend Evelaine. Especially Joffrey gave Raina so many gifts. She couldn't even express the gratitude she felt. The youngest son had fond memories of the day he fell from the tree, and Raina was the first to run to help him. But for some reason, Raina herself didn't remember anything about it. It was a necklace with blue stones, the same delicate shade as Felix's eyes. It was the family jewel, blessed blue. It was very difficult to accept such a valuable gift, but Evelaine insisted that Raina not be shy, since she was now a member of the family. The girl would carefully keep the jewel. Felix, this kid, he has to come back before the Festival of Forgiveness. Evelyn was very worried about this. Otherwise, he would ruin all the plans. By the way, news came from the house where Raina used to live. The Homewood family planned to visit the girl before the festival. Raina's parents? Are they coming here? Oh no. The girl was seized with a blue flame of panic. Evelyn noticed Raina's drooping mood again. Apparently, she wasn't very happy to see her relatives. But it's okay if the girl doesn't want to see them. Evelyn will understand that and refuse them. Raina seemed to be returning to the past, where she suffered bullying, where her older sister beat her. If people here knew who Raina was in her home, where no one respected her, would they still consider her part of their family? The girl was afraid. Memories from her past life rose like a lump in her throat. She could barely hold back her tears. Get a grip. Yes, now she's Raina Dispenser. The past life is over once and for all. There's nothing to fear. Everything is good now. The guests arrived at the estate. Catherine Homewood was laughing all the time. She didn't know how to behave. The reception was very warm. Roxy, in turn, stood nearby and constantly turned up her nose. Catherine Homewood couldn't wait to see Raina. Oh, how she wondered what dirty work the girl was given and how she was humiliated in this house. Countess Evelyn greeted the dear guests and asked them to come into the hall and sit at the table. Eventually, they made their way to see Raina, but Raina herself was nowhere to be found. Where did she go? It seems she was preparing for the festival, Viscountess Evelyn asked. Not to worry, Raina will come soon. Raina must have been hiding from her guests on purpose because she felt so bad here that she was ashamed and didn't want anyone to see her. At least that's what Roxy decided. It's already spring. And there's only one reason why no invitation has come yet. The groom has rejected the bride. There was no talk of a wedding. It seems Raina tried to hide her nature as best she could, but no one believed her again from Roxy's point of view. Let's see what happened to that sissy who spent her days just cleaning the house. After all, Raina could never change. Catherine Homewood sipped her tea in anticipation. The jaw literally dropped like a broken spare part. The tea splashed back into the cup. Catherine's eyes Homewood bulged as the door opened. Raina swaggered into the room, and she looked simply irresistible. The delicate pink dress sat perfectly on the girl, and her loose golden hair was decorated with a flower. What's more, she herself looked like a spring flower. Envy flushed crimson on Roxy's face. There was no way her clumsy little sister was any better looking than she was, but it seemed that everyone was. The shock that paralyzed Catherine Homewood stepped back a little. She couldn't believe that the beautiful girl standing in front of her was her daughter. Roxy was in her element as soon as she saw her younger sister. She immediately demanded that she make her tea with milk. In Roxy's eyes, the younger one always remained a servant. No, that's not necessary. Evelyn snapped. Tea? Coffee? Cappuccino. You can ask the maid when she comes. Here it is. That very feeling. The feeling of protection and love from a loved one. The feeling that Raina experienced for the first time. But it's okay. These are Raina's guests, so it won't be hard for the girl to make them some tea. It seems Raina naively believed that her blood relatives really care about her life. She smiled and went to the kitchen. Exactly, Roxy snorted. No matter how her little sister looked, she never missed an opportunity to humiliate her. And yes, Roxy didn't come here to talk to her little sister. She had other goals, so she stood up, looked around, turned around, and headed into the hallway. Raina's status has risen, I suppose, and she's now rolling in money. And the house is still beautifully decorated. Well, the wily Roxy decided to sniff out what Raina is hiding. Hey, you. So brazenly and unceremoniously, Roxy addressed the maid Jane, who was the first to catch her eye. Roxy demanded to be taken to Raina's room, but she was politely refused. According to Jane, even though Roxy is a guest here, it is currently a bit difficult to get into the younger mistress's room, and Roxy hit the maid right in the face, putting all her strength into this slap. She was already used to hitting Raina in any unclear situation, and here some servant dared to contradict her. Jay's cheek immediately burned with pain. Raina's room, Roxy initially thought that the maid had made a mistake and taken her to the wrong place, but it turned out that this luxurious mansion belonged to none other than her younger sister. Bursting into tears, the maid asked Roxy to leave the premises, since she had already looked around and was probably expected in the dining room. Yeah, right. Roxy wasn't going to leave. How she envied her sister. She couldn't allow Raina to live in such luxury. Having slammed the doors behind her, Roxy began to carefully examine everything, wondering how her former servant was living now. And all this was bought especially for Raina? Roxy still couldn't believe how drastically her sister's life had changed. They even hung curtains for her. Raina could only dream of such luxury before. And how much junk they bought her. What beautiful dresses, jewelry, these clothes must cost a fortune. Even Roxy didn't have such clothes, so the red dress goes to the Homewood house. Roxy decided that it would suit her better and carefully took it into her hands. But the most valuable things, as a rule, are always hidden from prying eyes. And Roxy's gaze was directed to the nightstand standing in the very corner of the room. I wonder what could be hidden there. Gently pulling the handle of the nightstand, Roxy found an expensive box there. Probably there are jewelry in it. Roxy's eyes lit up as soon as she opened the box and saw blessed blue. How could such beauty be hidden? Insidious Roxy decided to steal it. Well, these are definitely not the kind of guests you want to see again. Evelyn threw her head back. After her interaction with the Homewood family, she looked like she had unloaded a train car. And these intrusive guests even managed to be seen off without incident, the first time. Roxy especially was in a hurry to leave the estate. Now Viscountess Evelyn looked at Raina and saw in her only the worthy Mrs. Dispenser. Oh, how nice it was for Raina to be praised by her new mother, and she was very grateful to Evelyn for putting up with the family meeting. Raina beamed with happiness when Evelyn gently stroked her head. How she missed such moments in childhood, because she always tried so hard to be good, and all the laurels went to Roxy. Meanwhile, the cunning Roxy had already put on blessed blue. She did a great job and even mentally thanked her younger sister for the fact that thanks to her, she was able to steal such a treasure. Raina almost fainted when she entered her room. It seemed like a hurricane had passed through. All the things were scattered. Someone had been in charge here, and this someone was obviously looking for something. The first thing the girl did was look into the box to check if the blessed blue, a family heirloom that Viscountess had given her, was still there. Evelyn as a sign that Raina was accepted into the family. The worst fears were confirmed. Blessed blue was missing. Someone was rummaging through Raina's things. The maid came in. She was shocked by the picture of devastation no less than Raina herself. The first thing the girl did was ask the maid if she had cleaned the room. Perhaps she had moved the blessed blue and simply forgot to mention it. But Viscountess Evelyn told her not to enter the room because the younger mistress was resting there. And then the maid fell to her knees and through uncontrollable tears told her that yesterday there had been a guest in Raina's room, and it was her sister Roxy. Now everything fell into place. Raina realized that she had been robbed, but the most offensive thing was not even that a valuable thing had been stolen, but that it had been done by her own sister. Raina fell to her knees. No, she just collapsed, exhausted. There was a lump in her throat. She couldn't say a word. She felt empty. It's probably best not to tell anyone about what happened for now, because if Viscountess Evelyn will hardly be happy when she finds out how the girl let her down by allowing her most expensive thing to be stolen. Gloomy as a rain cloud, the girl sat in the garden and looked at the spring flowers, but the beauty of the plants did not please her at all. All her thoughts were only about how she had let her mother down, and that if she did not correct the situation, then her days in the new family were numbered. Raina never picked flowers. She liked to see them grow. She stroked the petals and sometimes talked to them as if they were living people. The maid's cheek was swollen. Raina noticed it even then. Probably someone had beaten her. Roxy probably hit the maid for disobeying her just like she hit Raina. And what to do now? What to do at any cost to return blessed blue. But how to do it? The girl looked at the flowers as if she expected advice from them. But alas, the plants could not speak. They only silently swung on a vertical. Tears rolled down the girl's cheeks. She cried all day, but it didn't get any easier. If she couldn't get the blessed blue back, she would have to tell Evelyn everything. Raina imagined how she would say that her mother had entrusted her family heirloom to her, and she hadn't been able to keep track of it. She should have been more careful, more attentive. Maybe she should have installed a lock. But it was too late to think about that now. Raina took a deep breath to start crying again. What if she never found blessed blue? Raina felt sick just thinking about it. The girl's crying attracted attention, and someone was already rushing to find out what was going on. Someone she didn't expect to see. Eden arrived. He thoughtfully handed over a handkerchief so that Raina wouldn't wipe her tears with her sleeve. Raina sobbed, but she couldn't find the right words to describe her depressed state, so the sentence remained unfinished. Eden looked at the girl with understanding. He knew what trials of fate she had to go through, and he wanted to listen to her. The guy decided that Raina was lonely in the company of plants, so he decided to come up and talk. You never know. Maybe he could help somehow. Oh, how Raina wished that it was just like that she was crying because she was lonely or because of some other trifle. But in reality, it was much more serious. Eden gently took the girl's hand. She was shaking, just like flowers in the cold wind. Raina raised her tear-stained eyes. She felt the support and warmth of her loved one again. It seemed that the bad thoughts were gradually receding. If you don't want to, don't say what happened. Everyone has days when they want to cry. Is today one of those days? Eden said and smiled. There is nothing scary or shameful about crying. Everyone has problems, but if you have a good cry, your thoughts will clear up. And then, you see, the solution to the problem will come by itself. Raina tried to smile, and she even managed it for a moment, but it was a rather forced smile. And a new burst of tears moistened the handkerchief that the girl pressed to her face. This could not go on forever. It was time to pull herself together. The girl thanked Eden for not standing aside and showing concern. Thanks to this guy, she really felt better. Well, she will definitely wash the handkerchief and return it. Honestly, it was time to tell all. Raina decided to go further and asked if Eden knew what the blessed blue was. Of course he did. When Raina said she had lost the blessed blue, Eden was almost stunned. He looked like he had been doused with a bucket of boiling water. It seemed that the precious sister had stolen the blessed blue. It was terrible. And now it seemed that Eden was ready to cry. Raina thought about her relationship with her sister. Of course, relatives have conflicts, but they rarely reach the point of assault and theft. But Raina and Roxy seem to have built their entire relationship on this. Once upon a time, her grandmother, the only person who treated Raina with warmth and love, gave her a green bracelet. It is so nice to receive a gift from a loved one. But Roxy took the bracelet for herself and a lot of her stuff. It was just like her. If she liked something, she would take it and never share. On the other hand, I wanted to believe that it wasn't Roxy, but someone else. Raina looked into the distance and still hoped that everything would be resolved peacefully, although she understood that it was impossible. Raina's head dropped again, and it seemed as if the girl was about to burst into tears again. But she raised her head, and now her tear-stained eyes were full of determination. She had to find the blessed blue, but there was a huge problem. Raina didn't know if she would be allowed into the Homewood estate, and even if she did, if she asked Roxy directly about the necklace, she still wouldn't give it back. Eden laughed. It seemed he knew how to get the necklace without visiting Homewood Manor. To see your sister, you don't have to visit her house. You can meet at a festival in the capital. She will definitely attend it. That's right. Raina is going to the festival. Not only will she have a great time, but she'll also get her precious belongings. Her mood improved so much that she almost squealed with delight. Eden suggested that they go together to look for the blessed blue. With his help, everything will work out. Eden, he may not be Felix, but he can help too. He winked and gave her a thumbs up. Raina couldn't help but smile now. As a sign of support, Eden took the girl's hand again. It was so sweet that she almost melted. When Eden asked what was wrong, he was very happy when Raina said that she was not crying because of her life here. The whole family was worried that it might be difficult for her to live alone in a new place. Now Raina will talk about her difficulties and she will always be helped. And she also promised to never cry alone again. Family. How much warmth there was in this word. Loving people who will always support and come to the rescue. Oh, how Raina missed this. Good. Now everything will be fine. If they help each other in everything, they will easily overcome all difficulties and problems. The friends laughed. I will help Raina as I promised. But keep in mind, brother, in 2 years her husband may be someone else. Read the text of the letter that Eden sent to Felix. When Felix read the letter from Eden, he grabbed his head. Did he really have a competitor in the form of his own brother? He is partly right. Eden was partly right. Even Lloyd thought so, although he was busy with his own affairs. Well, how to say affairs, he was sprawled on the sofa and reading a fresh newspaper, while Felix could not find a place for himself. Felix put the letter down and stared at Lloyd. He thought his friend didn't know what he was talking about, but in fact, Lloyd understood it all much better than he did. Avoidance is not an option. Sure, he could continue to sit here and sulk, but if Felix wanted to see her, it was time to come out of his den. Oh yes, Felix really wanted to see her. How he missed her voice, her golden hair and her eyes. So beautiful and at the same time sad. Meanwhile, Raina was heading to the festival. She was wearing a lilac dress decorated with flowers. She closed her eyes, trying to collect her thoughts. Eden, who was accompanying the girl, was already beginning to worry about whether she was feeling well, since Raina had not said a word for the last half hour. If Raina was seasick because they were riding in a carriage that was shaking, then Eden could have asked the driver to go slower. But that was not the case. The girl was very worried. She left the Dispenser estate without telling Evele, and probably her mother was already looking for her. But what could she do? If she got angry, Raina would understand everything. But what if Roxy doesn't listen to her sister and doesn't return the blessed blue? What if words alone aren't enough? Eden suggested giving her a good punch. Was Eden really suggesting to hit Roxy? Oh no. Raina had never fought in her life. She couldn't even imagine such a picture. And Eden began to teach Raina how to fight. He showed him how to clench his fists, how to swing, and how to concentrate his strength. Bang! The blow was so loud that the coachman jumped up in his seat. Raina turned out to be much stronger than it seemed at first glance. And probably if Eden had not intercepted her hand in time, she could have easily turned his jaw to the side. Eden asked the girl to be careful so that she wouldn't accidentally hurt herself due to the shaking. Raina went into her thoughts again. Eden suggested looking out the window. It looked like the carriage was already approaching its destination, and indeed, when Raina looked out, it turned out that they had already arrived at the festival, and they had arrived just in time. That opened up before Raina was simply mesmerizing. Raina had never been to such a huge celebration before, and it seemed she was a little afraid. Colorful ribbons and flags decorated the festive street. People walked in the fresh air and smiled at each other. Fireworks exploded with pops in the evening sky, giving it the brightest and most unusual shades. The festival was in full swing. Raina couldn't tear herself away from the window. She was watching such a grandiose spectacle. However, for Eden, it was a familiar picture. I wonder if the older brother has arrived? Felix promised to appear at the festival, but so far he has not been seen anywhere. As if enchanted, Raina continued to admire the beauty from the window. The fireworks reflected in her eyes, and it seemed that she forgot about her problems for a while. Eden asked the coachman to stop the carriage. They would get out here, not at the guest house, so that they could have a better look around. Eden's smile was warm and trustworthy. The friends were about to take a walk around the central square. The celebration was in full swing. Ladies in expensive clothes strolled along the street and in the hall, accompanied by exquisite gentlemen. The women engaged in small talk, discussed current news, and simply gossiped. Raina felt a little shy before getting out of the carriage. There were so many strangers around. Eden offered her his hand. There was nothing to be afraid of. Eden reassured the girl, reminding her that his older brother would be there. He would definitely not let anyone be hurt. It had been about a month since Raina had last spoken to Felix. It would be awkward to speak to him again after such a long silence. Raina seemed more upset than excited by the news that she would inevitably have to see Felix. But it was necessary, because he was her future husband. Eden's last instruction for the day was for the girl not to think about anything. Well, at least for her to try not to think about the bad and keep her head clear. A carefree smile finally lit up Raina's face, and she set off to find her older sister to return her property, which she had cynically stolen. In the noisy crowd, Raina felt so small and defenseless, like a lost little child. And here is Roxy, unsuspecting, talking to some guy, wearing a familiar red dress and, of course, blessed blue around her neck. Raina clenched her fists and walked towards her older sister. It was time to settle this misunderstanding once and for all. Roxy. Her sister's name sounded like a clap of thunder, and Raina's hand fell on her shoulder. Now all eyes were on the feuding sisters. The people around them began to whisper, wondering who this brave girl was next to Roxy and what was going on there. "Let's go, let's get out," she barked. Roxy tried to drag her younger sister out into the street, realizing that the risk of embarrassment was greater than ever. But Raina stood firmly on her feet and was not going to go anywhere. She would not leave this place until she got what belonged to her, namely the precious thing given to her by her mother, which she took without asking. Roxy laughed. She didn't see any problem with it. She just took another trinket from her clumsy little sister, that's all. Roxy's sly expression indicated that she was about to tell the familiar stories about how, if it weren't for her, Raina would have achieved nothing in life. Oh, yes, the old songs about the main thing. Have you really forgotten that it's only thanks to me that you've started living a beautiful life? You owe me for the rest of your life. And how dare you even show up at my place like that? Roxy laughed. She really thought Raina was so naive that she would believe all the nonsense she spewed. Viscountess Evelay doesn't even know she's missing her jewelry. Good job, sis. Roxy laughed. She judged Raina by herself and thought she stole the necklace. Are you out of your mind? Why did you even need to send her there? A child who has never been in high society. This is simply outrageous. Evelay condemned Eden's decision to leave Raina unattended at the festival. Eden looked down. He didn't know what to answer. He was trying to cover Raina now, but Evelay seemed to have already begun to guess that something was wrong. The arguments that Raina was no longer a little girl didn't work either. They were simply irrelevant when Evelay was worried. Oh, how Eden wished he could tell her everything, but he couldn't because he promised Raina to keep her secret while she tried to figure it out on her own. Oh, how Eden would like to be next to Raina at this difficult moment. More than anyone. But this place is meant for someone else. Meanwhile, at the festival, the sisters continued to sort things out. And strangely enough, Roxy was now expressing admiration because she thought Raina had stolen the necklace. For Raina, this was even more offensive because she had never stolen anything in her life, and now the situation could turn out in such a way that she would be made guilty of stealing something she had not committed. Watch your language. Do you think everyone in the world is as mean as you? Raina launched a counterattack. It's not good to judge everyone by yourself. What are you allowing yourself to do? Roxy didn't expect such courage from her younger sister and was now boiling like a pot-bellied samovar. No matter how hard life is, no matter how expensive things are, and no matter how envious you are, no one will resort to stealing like you. Raina tried to reason with her sister, which, naturally, was useless. Raina looked up and glared at Roxy with a look of contempt and disgust, the way people would look at a dirty public toilet. That was the last straw. Roxy finally lost her temper and threw the glass of wine aside. The glass landed right on the shirt of Duke Lloyd, who was already there, staining his expensive clothes red. He came over on purpose to help. Raina realized that. I wonder what he'll do next. Lloyd winked slightly, seeming to take on the threat of Roxy and help Raina settle this misunderstanding. And Roxy seemed to have been replaced. She bowed, asked forgiveness, both for her clumsiness and for not saying hello. She fluttered around the Duke like an annoying fly, hoping that he remembered her. Exactly, Roxy. Homewood, the Duke remembered her, or pretended to remember her, one way or another. This scene was so strange that he could hardly contain his laughter. After thinking a little more, the Duke realized that if this girl's last name was Homewood, she was probably the fiancée of his friend Felix. No, it's not her. My fiancée is Raina Homewood. Felix appeared behind the girl as suddenly as a mushroom after rain, and if it had been anyone else, she would have even been scared. But now she was more than ever happy to see her fiancé. Felix apologized for being late. He wanted to say a lot now, but the tense atmosphere was not conducive to a lyrical dialogue. Roxy's face twisted into an angry grimace. 3 against 1. It looked like she had lost this battle, especially since F was wondering why she was hanging around here. The lovebirds were reunited again. The Duke's attention was completely focused on Raina. He was very happy to finally meet his friend's fiancé. Oh well, even if it was a scandal, even if it wasn't at the most opportune moment, at least Roxy met the Duke this way, who, by the way, no longer cared about her. The Duke was caught up in a conversation with Felix and Raina, while Roxy remained on the sidelines. It seemed that if she were to disappear into thin air now, no one would notice. Spinning sharply around her axis and realizing that she had nothing more to do here, Roxy headed towards the exit. Stop! Raina yelled, Dot. She wasn't going to just let her sister go and let her get away with stealing. They weren't done yet. Felix grabbed Raina's arm in an attempt to stop her. Whatever her older sister was and whatever she had done now, she wasn't worth this much attention and wasted nerves. I have some things I need to sort out. Let me finish what I started, Raina growled. And no one dared to contradict the girl. Felix and Lloyd understood that the matter was very important and silently watched as events developed further. Stop, Roxy, we're not done talking. Raina followed her sister's heels and wasn't going to back down for a second. Enough. Why are you picking on me? Roxy exploded and turned towards Raina. She had always been very hot-tempered. Choke on that trinket, it's already stuck in my throat. With a frantic scream, Roxy tore off a herring and threw it right into Raina's face. But the throw was too weak and the earring did not reach its target, falling to the floor. Tears glistened in the wound's eyes, and it seemed to her that the blessed blue, at least the earring from his set, had broken and would only get worse. The sisters were so engrossed in their quarrel with each other that they did not even notice how a woman approached them and picked up the discarded jewel. It was Countess Evelay. Now she understood everything. Here it is, the apple of discord. Here it is, the reason why Raina cries all the time. By the way, Raina is also missing a dress. And our Oxy's clothes are somehow very suspiciously similar to the things that disappeared from Raina's wardrobe. I see you've decided to keep all the gifts I gave her, haven't you, Roxy? Evelay asked. Her tone was calm and composed. She wasn't angry at all. Rather, she was just humanly offended. I didn't take anything. Raina gave it all to me herself. Roxy screamed. Now she realized that her sister really hadn't stolen anything, and she justified herself as best she could. Not only is she a thief, she's also a liar. Evelay had seen enough and demanded that everything stolen be returned to her house by noon tomorrow. She forgave Roxy only because she was Raina's sister. Raina felt now. She begged for forgiveness, and she should have told everything earlier. Evelay hugged her shoulders. Blessed blue, which Roxy had not yet managed to return, flew across the kitchen. Who does Raina think she is to talk to her older sister like that? Roxy was now complaining to her mother. But instead of getting support, she had to listen to a whole lecture about how she should think with her own head, since she had already been given enough money. So there was no need to steal. Not only that, in front of the Duke of Lloyd Cornwall had disgraced herself, and Raina had also been screaming obsessively, attracting the guests' attention, and had completely disgraced Roxy. She still couldn't come to terms with it. And all because of this unfortunate necklace, this is what I took the decoration to take a better look at it. It seems that the older sister lied so much that she began to believe her own lies. As soon as the mother took a close look at the blessed blue, she literally exploded with anger, and her face broke out in cold sweat. Oh God, please, Roxy, tell me Raina gave you this. I mean, gave it to you as a gift? The sobbing mother begged. Stop acting like an empty-headed fool, shook her eldest daughter as if she were a sack of potatoes. Roxy still did not understand why the whole world was so sharply against her, and why her own mother was so furious. Catherine Homewood shoved blessed blue right in the nose. Didn't she see that it said Philip II when she stole the jewel? And indeed, on the back of the necklace there was a profitable inscription, which read, Lily Dispenser, by Philip II. Philip II is the great-great-grandfather of the Duke of Cornwall, the emperor of our empire. But what is his relation to the Dispenser family? The thing is that Lily was the beloved of the emperor. Lily, the chosen one of the Emperor Philip II, was from the common people, and only 30 years after their death, the people learned about the connection between the king and the simpleton. Before this, some people even thought that there was no Lily at all, but no one guessed that she was from the Dispenser family. No one cared about her last name. However, according to rumors, she did not at all resemble a commoner. She always dressed tastefully, was well-bred, and had a kind heart. Anyway, Roxy and Catherine Homewood had to learn as much as he could about Viscount. Who knows what other secrets might be hidden within the walls of his estate? The Viscount turned out to be a much more important figure than expected, and a wicked smile appeared on Catherine's face. Homewood, Raina sat in front of Evelay with a guilty look. She realized what she had done and understood that now she would have a very difficult conversation. But why be so angry at the child? Evelay had no grudge against Raina and did not want her to be angry at Roxy. Evelay was very upset, and Raina felt a pang in her heart. The girl was being extremely rude and stealing Raina's things. Evelay was upset that she couldn't do anything to help her new adopted daughter while she was trying to solve everything herself. Evelay was also upset by the fact that Raina didn't tell her anything about what happened, because now they were the closest people, and they certainly had to share their problems. That's what family is for. To be together at such moments and help each other. The feeling of shame burned like hell in Raina's soul. How ashamed she was ready to fall through the ground, and tears sparkled in her eyes again. Raina, To never hurt again, never refuse our help, Evelyn insisted. Evelyn hugged Raina tightly, like a mother who, although she was a girl, had never felt such care from her. In the warm embrace of her new mother, Raina could not hold back her tears. She felt so warm and cozy, as if she had become a little girl again. If family members do not hide their problems from each other, share their experiences, and resolve all troubles together, then they will become much closer. Raina realized this only now. Leaving the room, Raina closed her tear-stained eyes and took a deep breath, completely unaware of Felix, who was already waiting for her. It looks like everything worked out, but Felix, when did he manage to show up here? And how long had he been here? He probably heard this difficult conversation. Felix was worried about his bride, so he decided to wait. He apologized for the unexpected invasion and looked at Raina with his sky-blue eyes. No problem. The girl smiled. She was already gradually getting used to the sudden manifestations of her future husband. The future husband gently touched her shoulder and asked for only one thing: to spend a little time together. Well, a personal attack can happen. I've already gotten used to the sudden appearance of my future husband Ryan, but not quite yet to his sudden touches. Felix had traveled a very long way and thought it would be great if the girl would go out with him for a walk and close her eyes to that recent misunderstanding when he caught her in the room in a piquant situation by entering there without knocking. They headed to the amusement park, and as soon as they left the house, Raina's face was filled with that same clear as day and beautiful smile. Everything around was so bright and beautiful that the girl constantly turned her head, trying to see everything as best as possible. As soon as the environment changed, there was no trace left of the sadness she had been immersed in just a few minutes ago. Raina was simply glowing with happiness. Her eyes were shining like the lights of little fairies. There were no more haughty ladies from high society around, so the girl could be herself. Oops. Raina was so carried away by what was happening around her that she completely forgot about her future husband. How rude it is to pay him at least a little attention. Felix's hand timidly reached out to Raina. Judging by this gesture, he wanted to take her somewhere interesting. They took each other's hands and went for a walk. A pleasant and warm evening awaited the future spouses. Raina literally burst into tears when she saw the stall with soft toys. Her eyes just ran wild, but she liked one toy more than all. Felix noticed this and immediately bought his bride a pink plush rabbit. Raina was very surprised by her groom's attentiveness because she had not said anything to him. So Raina assumed that Felix was no longer angry. If he was angry, he probably wouldn't be so polite to her. That's a good sign. It means everything is okay. Tired after a long walk, Raina collapsed on a bench to rest and placed 2 bags with gifts next to her. Did you order cotton candy? Please. Felix had already bought some and had chosen the sweetest vanilla pink one, just like the plush bunny he had bought the day before. It's time to take a short break. Raina walked a lot today, and her legs were literally falling off. The girl was tired, but it was a pleasant tiredness, not at all like after cleaning or cooking. With her eyes shining, the girl literally pounced on the cotton candy and started gobbling it up. It was very cute, but actually a little strange. It turned out that she would try such a delicacy for the first time in her life. When Raina was a volunteer at an orphanage, the little inhabitants often asked her if she had tried certain sweets and what they tasted like. Now she knows that cotton candy is not only delicious, it also melts in your mouth like a little cloud. And now Raina will definitely tell the kids about it. Oops. The girl blushed a little because she was so carried away by eating cotton candy that she again forgot that her future husband was nearby. Of course, such a delicacy should be shared with your neighbor. Moreover, Felix was still looking at Raina with slight bewilderment. Felix sniffed the cotton candy as if he was seeing it for the first time in his life, and then carefully pinched off a small piece. Now, the sweet couple enjoyed the vanilla treat together. How nice it is to share such wonderful moments with a loving person. And this applies not only to cotton candy. Raina and Felix liked each other at first sight, and now Felix found himself thinking that he was really starting to fall in love. And Raina now knew that together they could cope with any troubles, because they were a family. But as soon as Felix swallowed the first piece of the treat, he coughed a little. The cotton candy turned out to be too sweet for him, and apparently he didn't want any more. Well, okay then. I'll finish it myself. Raina turned around and continued enjoying the light, cloud-like pink sweetness. And why did he say that to Felix? As if lightning had struck, we could have eaten together, admired the lights of the evening amusement park. But no, he ruined everything again. Okay, you need to be more careful. Otherwise, there might be misunderstandings. But how much more careful can you be? Oh, it's not an easy task to win a girl's heart, much more difficult than studying higher mathematics at the academy. Raina didn't look up from her cotton candy, and Felix stared into space in front of him. An awkward pause and an awkward atmosphere. Raina glanced sideways at her future husband, then asked if he had seen everything when he had burst into her room without knocking. Felix's face turned pink, the exact color of the cotton candy and the stuffed rabbit he had bought for Raina. His eyes widened and his mouth opened slightly, but instead of any coherent speech, only a few sounds came out. Felix asked for forgiveness. Beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. Apparently, he was very ashamed, but it all happened by accident. You're just making excuses now. Raina smiled lightly. She didn't hold a grudge against Felix at all. After all, they were going to spend the rest of their lives together. Felix grabbed his head. He remembered the very strange events that happened to Raina while she was ill. The groom sat day and night by the bed where his exhausted bride lay, hoping that she would wake up healthy, or that she would need something and he would be there. Suddenly, the girl got up from the bed. At first glance, she was better. Felix was happy, but she did not see him. How scared he was then, because Felix had never seen anything like this before. Raina was delirious. She thought she was in the Homewood house, and despite her grave condition, she was eager to start work around the house. We need to make breakfast before they wake up, Raina whispered, then fell out of bed and burst into tears. Apparently, no one cared about the well-being of their youngest daughter in their previous home. Felix saw Raina crying and cursing herself. He comforted her and told her that everything would be fine. Her condition touched his soul, and he realized that he wanted to take care of her. Embracing his bride, Felix felt her faint breathing. He felt her heart beating, and it seemed that they were alone in the whole world. And he was very afraid of causing her even more pain when the girl pretended that everything was fine. Felix regretted that he had behaved so carelessly and was very afraid of causing the girl even more pain when she pretended that everything was fine. I should ask for forgiveness now, but he ran away like a complete fool. Felix was afraid that his fiancée would start to hate him, and that's why he couldn't apologize earlier. Raina laughed with a laugh as loud as a bell. If they had been honest with each other then, they would not have grown apart, and no one would have been tormented by conscience. Raina also apologized for avoiding Felix and thanked him for his honesty. After all, the most important thing in a relationship is mutual understanding, and to achieve it, you need to share your feelings and experiences. Now they had forgiven each other. The misunderstanding had disappeared, and they could continue their walk. And our sweetie decided to go to the festival. Raina took her fiancé by the hand and stood up from the bench. Felix was so tall that when he sat and Raina stood, they were the same height. Ah, the sincerity. Raina was so open, honest, and positive that it was impossible not to fall in love with her. Now the bride was smiling, and the lovers, I guess you can call them that now, continued to enjoy this wonderful evening. Keep it up, guys. Raina, I missed you so much. Joffrey appeared like a jack-in-the-box and hugged the girl tightly. By the way, she missed you too. By the way, Joffrey was now taller than Raina. How quickly children grow. Only 15 days had passed, and he had grown so tall. Now he looked almost like a real man. Only his black hair was still disheveled. Joffrey, as best as possible, Raina had to look up at him, like Felix, and it was so unusual. Joffrey was also proud of his growth rate, and seriously intended to be Raina's date at the next event. At times like these, he was still the same kid. Hey, little one. Eden grabbed his younger brother by the collar. Leave Raina alone, you're making her dizzy. Eden tried to pull Joffrey away so he wouldn't get in his way. Joffrey gave his brother an angry look. He knew that his brother really just wanted to be the center of attention from Raina. Is this all about me? Unlike some, I am truly sincere in my feelings and actions. Joffrey seethed. Judging by the expressions on his older brother's faces, the atmosphere was starting to get heated. Oh, you bug, Eden exploded. He's planning to become a gentleman. Look at what he's got in mind. From Eden's point of view, Joffrey was too young to aim for the gentleman of this beautiful lady. Despite the fact that Joffrey was Evelaine's own son, it sometimes seemed that he was her complete opposite. If Evelaine was always serious and reasonable, then Joffrey treated life easily and with humor. That's his nature, and it's unlikely that he will ever change. Felix had the last word. As the older brother, he decided to resolve this conflict. Felix understood perfectly the compassion with which his brothers treated his bride, because the girl had a difficult fate and had previously lived in a family where she was not appreciated at all. But the excessive care and compassion from his younger brothers towards Raina was a kind of challenge for Felix. But Eden couldn't leave Raina alone in trouble, especially when Felix wasn't around. And besides, the Duke helped her. Keep in mind, brother, if this continues, someone else may take your place. Eden looked at his brother with all his usual sternness as he said these words. I don't even know if I'll give him up that easily. Felix yawned demonstratively. He didn't recognize his brother as a rival. A strong and intoxicating feeling filled Felix's heart, and it took a lot of effort to take Raina away from him because the name of this feeling was love. However, Eden understood perfectly well that he had no right to decide with whom Raina would be in the future, and even Felix could not do it. The girl herself would choose her future husband. And Felix once again plunged into memories of warm summer days when he worked as a volunteer at an orphanage, and, of course, about Raina. It all started with Joffrey. He stubbornly refused to help the adults with the work at the shelter because he came here to play with the other kids. Therefore, at the first opportunity, he ran away, so as not to be involved in hard work. What a shame. Not only was I tricked into doing tedious work, but now I'm forced to hide like a brave gangster. Felix and Eden volunteered to find the fugitive, but clearly underestimated his stealth skills. The older brothers walked around the orphanage for hours and constantly called Joffrey until they got lost themselves. But the boy hid and didn't even think about calling him names. Felix looked under every bush and every tree. He literally combed the area, but his younger brother was nowhere to be found. Joffrey was found as suddenly as he was lost. He literally fell on his brother's heads when he fell out of the tree, but the first one to come running to his aid was Raina. Why did this beautiful girl with such a clear look and the most beautiful smile in the world not remember this exciting story at all? Why didn't she remember Felix? After all, they had seen each other before and even talked. Felix didn't know this. But the saddest thing was that even Raina herself didn't remember anything about it. Your place next to Raina can be taken by someone else, Eden said as confidently as if he were claiming it himself. But Felix continued to think about it over dinner. Raina was sitting opposite and having a casual conversation with Evele. Judging by the fact that Evele was laughing, the girl was telling her something very funny. But the one who wasn't laughing was Felix. Sure, he got out of the situation pretty well. But if things continue like this, the circumstances might turn out so that Eden will be right. Don't you think you've wasted too much time? Felix's inner voice spoke in Lloyd's voice. Cornwall. And that in the future, her smile will be addressed to someone other than you? And Lloyd looked Cornwall again in Felix's imagination, is like a little devil. Yes, a little devil with horns, a tail, and other hellish attributes. In fact, despite the fact that Raina was engaged to Felix, they were not yet close enough to announce their relationship. So the place next to Raina remained vacant. The fear of losing his beloved was now stronger than ever. Felix was afraid, and he kept telling himself this. He lowered his eyes and finally sank into his thoughts. But I'm right. Felix felt like he was going crazy because the little devil Lloyd, who was currently his inner voice, was already dancing on the table in front of him. Well, you wouldn't have acted if it weren't for Eden and Cornwall? Yes, you would have worried about Raina, but you would never have approached first. And then you would have simply regretted those days. This unbearable little devil laughed like the devil himself. Bang! Felix's fist hit the table with such force that the plates of food jumped up with a clang. Oops! Felix came to his senses. He was so carried away by his thoughts that he didn't notice how he had detached himself from reality. And now his family had already begun to worry that he had been silent for so long, and then suddenly almost broke the table by hitting it with his fist. Oh, there was just a fly flying around. Felix tried to get out of the awkward situation as best he could. A fly flew, and he stopped it from being killed. With his fist. It was obvious that he was lying, and in fact, his thoughts were gone. Felix completely forgot that he was at the dinner table. And in the Dispenser family, it is customary to communicate during dinner, which the guy completely forgot about. And now he was very ashamed. Are you okay? Raina whispered to her future husband. She had never seen him like this before, and was seriously concerned about his changed behavior. Yes, indeed. In fact, Felix was completely fine, and he caught himself thinking that compared to those times, he was now much better. Compared to the times when he met Raina again in the orphanage, and she didn't even recognize him. Compared to the times when the girl disappeared, and nothing was known about her future fate. Compared to the times she experienced, humiliated in the Homewood family. Now she was not alone and she could not worry and not be anxious. Let the bride next to Felix as now only rejoice and smile. From now on, he will make a little more effort, and then she will love him. But the main thing is not to rush. The tea had already been finished, but Felix continued to sit at the dining table. Thoughts about his future bride did not give him peace, and now the time had come to share them. Evelyn sat opposite him and glared at Felix. He knew that look well and that a serious conversation would follow it. Raina wasn't around, so Evelyn decided to ask the question that had been bothering her the most lately. And the question was, why then, at the festival, both brothers left Raina alone at that festival, where she was trying to get back the blessed blue, which was stolen the day before by her own sister. The argument that Raina is not a child anymore did not work again. She is a child who did not receive the attention she deserved from her parents. No one can imagine what this innocent girl had to go through in that family, but Felix stood his ground. Raina was trying to figure this out on her own, and if you constantly forbid her to do things on her own, it would be hard to protect her. Raina needs to become more confident to get over her past, so Felix let her go. But sooner or later, she will cross paths with someone like that again. Felix was suggesting to leave Raina alone. Evelyn had already realized this, but from her point of view, her eldest son was thinking too recklessly. Sooner or later, a similar situation could happen again. Felix foresaw this, so he suggested not to interfere, or even better, to go somewhere, for example, to Green Lake. Well, no way. No Green Lake? Evelyn and Alex were unanimous on this. Such trips are fraught with the Dispenser family simply running out of money. They also need to be close to Raina in case the Homewood family tries to harm her. Whether out of envy or simple human stupidity, you can expect anything from these people. Therefore, Evelyn believed that the only right decision was to lie low. And if something happened, then the problem had to be solved together. Raina must not only overcome the past, but also accept that Homewood is no longer her family. This is not easy, because despite all the hardships and humiliations she has endured, Raina loved these people. It would hurt to give up something you so obviously loved and protected. That's why everyone, without exception, had to be with Raina. Evelyn was more serious than ever now. She even jumped up from the table. Evelyn and Alex tried very hard to give the girl maximum support. Emily just wanted the girl who always relied only on herself to know that in this world she is not alone. There are those who wish her only the best. But isn't that selfish? Even though they were doing it for the good, weren't they forcing her? If this house was going to oppress Raina in the same way, then how is Dispenser any different from Homewood? And let's not forget that she wasn't here by choice. Wake up, sweetheart. Someone's hand gently touched Raina's blonde hair, and the girl opened one eye to assess the situation. It was Evelyn, and she was in a good mood, and she came to personally wake Raina up and wish her a good day. Yawning sweetly, the girl sat on the bed and began to warm her eyes. And again it seemed to her that she had slept for an eternity, and she was a little ashamed of it in front of her mother. What is that next to her? There was a whole bunch of flowers on the bed. Raina immediately grabbed them and hugged them. Could it be that Evelyn had brought her the bouquet? No, it was Felix who brought his bride flowers, carefully placed them in the most visible place, and quietly left so as not to disturb the light sleep of his beloved. These are white tulips. They are very popular during the Festival of Forgiveness. One flower is given if you want to apologize for something, and Felix gave a whole bunch. Interesting. In fact, there were only 5 tulips in the bouquet, one for each offense. Gently hugging the bouquet, Raina sank into memories of the festival. Oh, how she loved flowers. Of course, she preferred plates in their natural environment. But no problem. She would put these tulips in a vase with water so that they would remain fresh and beautiful as long as possible. When you hug flowers like this, it seems like you're touching a soft cloud. Or cotton candy, which she and Felix, by the way, recently ate at the amusement park. When their eyes met, the girl's heart sank. Seeing Raina lost in her own thoughts, Evelyn became alarmed for a second, but the alarm turned out to be false, and she began to guess what was going on. Ah, those two went to the festival together. Evelyn guessed. It seemed like their relationship had improved. Should she say she was happy for them? When the maid entered the room, Evele admitted that she had another gift for Raina, this time from her personally. The box with the pink bow seemed so big in the small hands of the fragile girl, but at the same time it turned out to be completely light. I wonder what's inside. Oh my God. Raina couldn't believe that she was already awake. She felt like she was still watching her dream, because what was happening was unreal. How Evele guessed with the gift. It was the very thing that Raina dreamed about so much, and that her own mother would never have given her. Raina's slender fingers gently fingered the pink silk fabric. Evele stood holding her breath, hoping that her gift, which she had chosen for so long, would be to her liking. Oh yes. Raina really liked her mother's gift. It was a dress of a delicate pink color, like the sky before dawn, which the girl loved to meet so much. Now she will be beautiful, like a real princess. In that case, she had to try on a new dress and start preparing quickly, since her first ball was waiting for the girl. The Palace of Livencia is a unique place. It opens once during the Feast of Forgiveness. The carriage with the dear guests was already approaching the destination, and Eden took on the role of guide. Like a true gentleman, Eden offered his hand to the lady before she stepped out of the carriage. Eden admired the place and wanted to share his delight with Raina. Raina asked timidly, although the new dress perfectly emphasized her petite and graceful figure. Eden was surprised. The beauties he usually observed in high society could not put their own price on themselves and behaved extremely impudently. But this girl was not only extremely polite, she also doubted her own attractiveness. You look absolutely stunning. Eden knew it, and indeed, Raina was simply irresistible in this dress. The girl herself was so beautiful that any clothes suited her. Eden was very happy to see Raina first in this outfit. Raina breathed a sigh of relief. She wanted to look good for Eden too, a few minutes ago. Hey buddy, what's up? It's been 2 hours, where's your fiancé? The Duke of Cornwall continued to torment Felix with his jokes. In his mind, Felix begged Raina to come as soon as possible, because the witty Duke of Cornwall, or rather the Duke of Cornwall who thought he was witty, was already a pain in his neck. Nissa, the Dispenser residence, sounds like a good place to spend a summer weekend. What do you think? The letter read. However, it actually meant that Felix had something to discuss, and he asked Cornwall to come early. Sending letters like that always got on his nerves. Because of this letter, he barely managed to catch the sleeping image of his beloved. He gently kissed her forehead and slowly left. Cornwall's behavior was sometimes so eccentric that Felix began to doubt that the Duke was really going to help him. But, in fact, the Duke did everything for his friends. Jokes aside, it's time for a serious conversation. Finally, because Felix has almost exhausted the rest of his patience. Oh, who do I see, Duke? Is that you? I hope the solemnity of this holiday is also transmitted to you, Your Grace. Roxy came running as soon as she saw the Duke, just like a small dog scented its master. It seemed that the serious conversation would have to be postponed for a while, especially since the Duke noticed how Felix had darkened. And why would that be? Lady Homewood, we met recently. The Duke greeted the girl. Roxy. The girl reminded him that she had a name. When the Duke pretended to kiss her hand, he caught himself thinking that he had completely forgotten her name. But for some reason, he did not feel ashamed. Your charming image, Lord Duke, not only complements this celebration in Livencia, but also makes the late palace an even more beautiful place. Roxy simply brazenly flattered the Duke, how he loved such a man. Felix was darker than a thundercloud. Could this impudent individual really have allowed himself to speak out loud in the palace of Leda? This is a failure. All this is her impudent dreams, and she dared to speak so unceremoniously about the palace in which the royal couple lives. How stupid and greedy one must be. Lloyd's index finger Cornwall looked up as if he was about to say something important. Your words flatter me, of course, but next time you shouldn't say it so loudly. Oh, what are you doing here so early? Roxy burst out laughing, blushing with shame, trying her best to change the subject. Roxy's eyes widened and even bulged a little when she found out that Lloyd and Felix were expecting his bride. Maybe Lloyd Cornwall should have been more honest with the people around him. He had said so much nonsense in the last 5 minutes that Felix was already getting a headache. That snob Felix and his fiancée, the slob Raina, how they pissed Roxy off. And they also drove her crazy by sending her that trinket with the stupid name, Blessed Blue. The Duke's attention shifted to Raina, but he clearly wasn't interested in the girl. He wanted to hear what her younger sister was like as a child. Raina was probably just as cute. To tell you the truth, I didn't really care. Raina was so inconspicuous, it seemed like she didn't exist. Outrageously quiet, like a mouse, laughed Roxy. Well, that was not the story the Duke expected to hear. Roxy was already grown up and big as a mare, but she was still proud of the fact that she had bullied her younger sister as a child. What a shame. I think that's enough. If I were you, I'd keep my mouth shut. Felix loomed over Roxy like an avalanche that was about to collapse. Raina and Eden walked slowly towards Eden and Lloyd, who informed them that they would arrive earlier and would be waiting for them at the entrance. However, the sight that opened up before Eden and Raina made them slow down and then freeze completely. Felix was talking to Roxy, and the distance between them was frightening. To those close, it seemed as if Raina's fiancé was about to kiss her older sister. Raina always thought that unlike her, Roxy was charming and it wasn't difficult for her to conquer and break a man's heart. And now it's the same for Felix. Raina, in turn, was the complete opposite of her older sister. She never talked to guys, and she didn't have any friends either. She was too busy cooking, cleaning, and doing other housework. And then Raina remembered how Felix introduced her to Duke Lloyd Cornwall. He said, "This is my bride." Raina grabbed her head. Now she felt like a real fool. And how could she think such a thing about a man with whom she had just recently walked in the amusement park, who had bought her a plush rabbit and cotton candy? She would not run away again. Never. Now Raina felt that same self-confidence, piercing her mind like a steel rod, which she had been lacking all these years. That's right. Raina won't run away anymore because this man called her his bride. The withered Roxy didn't know what to say to this outrageous rudeness. She still didn't understand how that impudent snob Felix dared to behave so impudently. However, these are truisms that she was not destined to understand. The Duke, watching this tense scene from the side, was surprised, because he had known Felix for a very long time and had always made fun of him, but he had never seen such a violent reaction to his barbs. This reaction was simply amazing. It seemed that Felix had known his bride for a long time, much longer than the Duke had assumed. He had only just realized this. Until then, the Duke had been enjoying life carefree, but the news of the wedding literally stunned him. He even choked on his breakfast when Aaron read him a letter from the Dispenser family. The Duke watched his friend in different roles day after day. Could this be the same love that Felix lost his head from? But why did Felix never tell his best friend about this beautiful blonde girl? Because such great news would eclipse any article from the yellow newspapers. Oh, what a pity. It seems I don't know something. May I hear the story in all its details? The Duke immediately put in his 2 cents in an attempt to at least slightly diffuse the explosive atmosphere. It doesn't matter what the Duke knows about me. Roxy knew better than to pursue the topic further, because the more they discussed Raina, the longer she would be in her shadow. Besides, Roxy couldn't afford to ruin the impression of herself again, but in fact, there was nothing to fear, since she had initially created such a disgusting impression that there was simply nowhere to ruin it further. But as soon as he thought about Raina, the Duke turned his attention to the new guests. And here came the hero of the occasion. With a confident yet light gait in a delicate pink dress, Raina walked towards her friends, accompanied by Eden. But behind the girl's outward confidence, there was a shadow of doubt. Perhaps, first of all, it was worth sorting it out, because a couple of days had passed since Felix opened up to her. "Hey, here we are, Raina. Come to us." The Duke waved his hands as if they were the blades of a windmill, so that the girl would notice him. Now that everyone is here, well, it's time to sit down and talk. What the hell was Raina thinking? Dispenser today? Now she was simply burning with shame. She was ashamed that she had wound herself up, as if her fiancé had any interest in her older sister. But the Duke thought that Raina was thinking about something pleasant. "While you were gone, we talked about your childhood." These words brought Raina back to reality. She raised her head and goosebumps ran across her skin. She did not want to remember her childhood here and now. If they found out the whole truth about her, how would she look them in the eye later? Raina could manage, but once she pulled herself together, she said that there was nothing interesting in her childhood. A completely normal childhood. But Felix did not consider her childhood to be ordinary. Not every girl volunteers in an orphanage, after which she loses her memory, and is then bullied by her loved ones. There's nothing to talk about. Roxy snorted like a bald fox, trying to change the subject in order to enjoy a monologue about her beloved self. And indeed, the Homewood family did not let others get close to them. Their life was shrouded in darkness. In public, they tried to look decent and even cheerful people, but in small things, they never seemed sincere. And small things, as we know, form impressions. Meanwhile, for Raina, Felix was not indifferent. The Duke saw it just as he saw the changing behavior of his best friend. Raina sat silently next to her fiancé and looked at him so sadly, as if she wanted to ask for something. It was exactly the look a girl has when she looks at the guy she wants to spend the rest of her life with. A look full of love and tenderness. There is nothing wrong with you not going out into society. Many girls prefer the privacy of a garden or a library to noisy company, the Duke noted. Lloyd Cornwall valued a sharp mind in women. Perhaps that is why it was so difficult for him to choose a bride among modern girls. Raina, you are definitely a unique person. The Duke had already opened his mouth to spend the next half hour chatting, which, by the way, he did exceptionally well. But Felix, who had gotten up from the table, interrupted the speech that had not even begun. You look absolutely stunning tonight. I can't let this moment pass without dancing with you. I'd also like to take you on a date. Apparently, Felix really wanted to be alone with his fiancée, away from her unstable sister and the Duke with his endless nonsense. Raina nodded approvingly, blushing slightly or perhaps submitting to a slight blush. How could she refuse such a handsome and gallant gentleman? Well, on this note, we will probably leave you. Felix bowed and hurried away from this noisy company together with his bride. Oh well. The Duke understood perfectly well that the lovers missed each other and were not very interested in his company now. Well, no big deal. He would definitely tell his funny stories about another time. Where are your manners? Hey! Roxy jumped up. The Duke looked away, and the sweet couple did not notice this cry at all. Felix was also very worried about his bride, and even though he believed that the girl should deal with her problems on her own, he still tried to prevent them from arising. I can't believe they just left. Definitely no respect for us. They could use some basic etiquette, Roxy said in a haughty tone. It takes talent to display a complete lack of etiquette and still tell people what it is. Roxy, her mouth open, was about to pour a fresh portion of verbal manure on her younger sister, and at the same time give her a lecture on basic etiquette. But she was interrupted by Eden, who simply did not have the strength to listen to this seething. For the sake of decency and respect, you would do well to spread less false information about your sister. Don't you think you should be more restrained? Eden said and stood up from the table. Roxy gritted her teeth and tried to keep herself from smashing everything around her into pieces. But she also knew she would lose face if she made a scene in the middle of the party, so she held on as best she could. The atmosphere was really tense, so the Duke decided to leave too. Naturally, Roxy didn't like it, but Lloyd Cornwall had a special quip in store for her. I hope you smile more often next time, because the more you hide your discontent in society, the better. The Duke's words sounded like a coup de grace. Crimson Fantomas? Is that you? No, it's still the same Lady Roxy. Her complexion just changed a little after the Duke's words. Now it was exactly the same scarlet as the roses that adorned her dress in a simple pattern. Of course, she blamed Raina for everything. Raina, meanwhile, was heading. By the way, she herself did not know where her fiancé was taking her, since she had originally intended to get to the dance hall. But now they were walking in a completely different direction. The sounds of music were coming from somewhere far away. The party was in full swing and the dancing was about to start, so we needed to hurry. Raina tried to walk faster, but stumbled and almost fell. Felix caught her at the very last moment by the waist, not allowing the girl to have a date with the asphalt. Ah, these are new shoes. The girl is not quite used to them yet because they were high heels and not yet completely broken in, and, to be honest, they were terribly tight. Felix noticed that his bride was uncomfortable walking in her new shoes. He sat down next to her and carefully took off the annoying shoes. Was she really going to have to walk barefoot? For the sake of dancing with such a handsome man, the girl was ready to endure any pain. Not just this one. We can dance with you any other time, Felix said tenderly. It seemed he had other plans for tonight. An airy lightness enveloped Raina. She literally flew up in the most literal sense. She easily tore herself off the ground because her beloved took her in his arms. Raina, we have a date today. Felix smiled. He wanted to spend as much time with his bride as possible, tell her a lot, and show her a special place. Well, look at Raina. She was floating like a cloud in her lover's arms. She felt like she was in a dream. She felt so small and fragile in his strong arms. Her heart began to beat faster from sudden delight. The scenery changed, and a garden filled with wonderful scarlet roses opened up before the girl. She had never seen so many roses in her life. The girl's eyes simply ran wild. Everything around was so beautiful. She felt as if she had found herself in heaven. Dozens, hundreds, thousands of roses of all possible colors and varieties. Yes, this is the very place where she would like to live. It seemed to her that the earth was about to disappear from under her feet. This is a place for all couples to meet. Felix liked it too, and he brought his bride here for a reason. There was one special story connected with this place for him. This place is called Louse Garden. Philip II created it especially for his beloved. Due to the difference in social status, they could not be together, so only here they could spend time in secret from the public. Felix paused. Judging by his serious expression, this story meant a lot to him. He had never told anyone about it before, but he felt obliged to share it with his fiancée. The secret meeting could not last forever, so Philip's beloved the Seku had to make a difficult choice for the sake of her love, and since then no one has seen her in this country. Felix's eyes dropped and he bowed his head thoughtfully. It was clear that he was worried about their relationship as much as he was worried about his own. Well, not the happiest ending to a story. Raina thought about it. She had heard so many love stories and many of them ended tragically, and now she had to write her own. By the way, was her name Rose? Raina asked. It would be logical because wherever you looked, everything was strewn with roses. But here the girl was mistaken. In fact, the heroine of this beautiful but sad story was called Lily. Could this really be the same Lily? This name is engraved on the blessed blue. In that case, it turns out that this is not just a gift, not just a jewel, but a real family heirloom. Oh well, it seems Felix shamed his bride a little, and he even liked it a little. Either way, the choice of roses was not without reason. They were Lily's favorite flowers. Raina looked around. Now she saw not only beautiful flowers, but also a loving couple who had walked among them many years ago. The girl's eyes sparkled. She loved roses too, but it wasn't that they were her favorite flowers. She loved life in plants, as a phenomenon. The scent of blooming roses was simply enchanting, and the further the lovers moved into the garden, the more beautiful flowers there were around. This place was simply magical. Raina was glowing with happiness, like a little flame, and how wonderful it was to share these feelings with her fiancé. For Philip himself, the second this piece of land became a place of waiting. He could sit here for days on end, summer and winter, hoping that his beloved would return. The beautiful image of his beloved girl was forever imprinted in Philip's memory. 2, he just wanted to show her the garden filled with her favorite flowers. And when Lily came, Philip II felt like the happiest man. Neither money, nor status, nor luxurious palaces pleased him as much as the minutes spent with his beloved in this magical garden. Here he forgot about everything in the world and could be himself. What a pity that because of the gap between the classes, they could not be together. Felix had not told this story to anyone for a long time. And now, when he remembered the mental suffering, he felt sad. It seemed that this story also bothered Raina, but the girl rather tried to compare it with her own fate. In truth, she thought a little differently. It's a pity that their happiness couldn't last longer. However, the time they spent together was priceless. Raina initially thought that Dispenser was only treating her so well because she was from the Homewood family, but she realized that their feelings were genuine. This was especially true for Evelyn, who accepted her new daughter-in-law as her own. She doted on the girl and constantly showered her with such gifts, for which Raina was infinitely grateful. Raina thought the same about Felix in approximately the same way. In fact, status has no weight for Raina. Instead of dividing people into social classes like in the old days, she will cherish every moment because now she is with the people dear to her heart. Felix smiled, expressing his consent. He hadn't expected such revelations on the second date, and a radiant smile lit up Raina's face again. It was so sincere and clear that everyone around liked it, especially Felix, who caught himself thinking that he could respond to this smile forever. Warm lips gently touched Raina's cheek. After such revelations, Felix could not resist and kissed her on the cheek. The girl felt his hot breath on her skin. The groom kissed his bride for the first time, and this was a huge progress in their relationship. Why so suddenly? The girl even blushed a little. She felt so awkward, but in fact, she was still very pleased. This story touched the groom deeply, and this was the answer that resonated in his heart. But it seems that the lovers were distracted from their date. To feel the moment, Felix asked his fiancée to dance. The first dance, without annoying dukes and toxic sisters. In a beautiful sunny garden, this guy chose the perfect time and place. Smiling like a little sun, she accepted the offer with great pleasure. The sweet scent of blooming roses intoxicated her, and the lovers began to dance for the first time. The girl literally melted when the groom hugged her around the waist. She danced barefoot, among the beautiful roses in the rays of the setting sun. It seemed that they were alone in the whole world. A day passed since then. Raina enjoyed a quiet life. The girl couldn't even imagine how wonderful it was to spend all the time together like this and share emotions. To talk at the dinner table about various important and not so important things. To joke, to laugh, and to share your feelings. And Felix was there. Now they always had breakfast, lunch, and dinner only together. Raina liked this house and Dispensers, or rather the new family, more and more. Suddenly, Alex burst into the dining room holding a red message in his hand. It was very urgent. The official message stated that on the 27th, the Duke of Lloyd Cornwall was going to visit the Dispensers. The 27th is next week. So suddenly, and they had only just begun to live peacefully. Raina was surprised. Wouldn't her new mom and dad and brothers be happy about such a grand event? To be honest, it was a little bit annoying. Felix admitted that Lloyd Cornwall was a nice guy, but his natural talent for turning everything upside down was sometimes truly infuriating. The girl found it very funny that Felix was not particularly happy about his friend's upcoming visit either. Apparently, he would come to stare at Raina. Let's get ready and receive them in the highest class. Evelyn jumped up from the table and almost with a battle cry gave instructions to immediately begin preparations for the reception of the dear Duke. Preparations for the Duke's reception at the Dispenser estate were in full swing. According to Evelyn's instructions, the maids had changed the curtains for new ones. All that was left was to select flowers to go with them. This was going to be a grand event. Evelyn was excited and she was encouraged by the Duke at the highest level. Evelyn knew that her son was friends with the Duke, however, an official visit like this was a grand event. The Duke's family, due to their influence and busy schedule, cannot act towards any one particular family, but fortunately they decided to visit the Dispenser due to their friendly relationship with Felix. So one such visit will bring great benefit to the Viscount's family. If Dispenser succeeds at this reception, then of course the event will benefit Raina. Raina, by the way, was sitting at a table outside, put her head on the table and wrapped her arms around it, trying to hide from the whole world. What happened? The maid noticed that the girl was not in the mood and decided to ask how she could be of help. Jane decided that she was too nervous about the upcoming meeting, but there was no need to worry. Ms. Evelyn would conduct everything at the highest level. But in reality, Raina wasn't worried about that at all. She was afraid that she would behave stupidly again. She wasn't sure about her parents, but Roxy would definitely come, and all because Duke Lloyd would be at this meeting. Cornwall, I could talk to Felix about this right now. He would probably say that there is nothing to chew on, but it's not that simple. The girl's gaze was directed to the ground. It would seem that all people and circumstances were on her side, but nevertheless, Raina was troubled by a bad feeling. It seems that Dispenser were indeed happy to receive such an important guest as the Duke of Lloyd Cornwall and even prepared for his arrival with pleasure. It was unpleasant to realize this, but Raina found herself thinking that it would have been better if the Duke had not come at all. Now she was comfortably settled in the fresh air, meditating, and nothing was bothering her. But who knew what could happen in the next hour? Meanwhile, at the family estate, Homewood, Walter couldn't get enough of the fact that they no longer had to worry about money. By the way, his face had noticeably rounded out over the last few weeks. Apparently, he didn't refuse you a fine meal. Walter froze at his wife's stern gaze. She had put on a scarf and was apparently getting ready to go somewhere. In a commanding tone, Catherine told Walter to quickly go get ready and wash up, but he did not understand why it was so important. This is much more important than all these papers of yours. Catherine burst out screaming as if she was about to decide a matter of life and death. It turns out that all this fuss was because of the Duke of Lloyd Cornwall, who was about to visit Nisa. Walter and Roxy thought about it. as if they were deducing a chemical formula. But why would the Duke come to Dispenser? He wasn't particularly close to them. Walter couldn't understand that either. However, Walter didn't understand many things, since he wasn't particularly smart. You just have to go there and be patient for a while, Catherine insisted, poking her husband in the chest with her finger to make it more convincing. And in general, it seemed to her that their son Maurice was of no use. By the way, this also applied to Roxy. She was as useless as her brother. And why would that be? How she envied this Raina. She was at least of some use, and now she was the one getting all the cream. But where there is a duke, everyone strives to look at him. Roxy had to find a way to marry him. But there is one nuance. The day before, he had already turned Roxy down, and did it in a particularly harsh manner. But the mother was not at all concerned that her eldest daughter had been publicly ridiculed by the Duke. She firmly believed that the key to Lloyd's heart Cornwall is sure to be found. You just have to look hard enough. However, the Duke has not shown interest in any girl so far. However, little is known about his personal life. He created the impression of a lone wolf. How Roxy dreamed of the rich Duke paying attention to her, and she decided that now was her chance while the Duke was at Dispenser. Time was on her side. Meanwhile, the Duke was already racing to the Dispenser estate in his luxurious car. He enjoyed the ride, carefreely humming a song, and the wind ruffled his golden hair. Felix had barely opened the door when the Duke immediately pounced on him with hugs. Lloyd Cornwall was a sincere man and never hid his emotions, but Felix didn't really like hugging men, so he asked the Duke not to mess around. From the Duke's point of view, Felix's reaction was not very welcoming, but it was okay. By the way, he brought a whole crowd of nobles with him, without warning Felix about it at all. "Didn't you want me to help you?" The Duke put his hand on Felix's shoulder. "Yeah, right. I already helped. Because of this Duke, Raina is already unwell." The Duke couldn't think of anything better than a holiday in Nice anyway, so he decided to stay with Dispenser for a month or two. Snapping his fingers, the Duke asked his friend to take good care of him, his tone being so mocking that Felix barely resisted the urge to flick the Duke himself on the forehead. Meanwhile, the nobles had already occupied the Dispenser estate. Ladies and gentlemen walked around the estate as if they were at home, sipped wine, and looked at luxury items. One particularly curious woman was attracted by a painting on the wall. It was a portrait of the Dispenser family. "How do you like the paintings?" Alex noticed the sudden interest and decided to keep the conversation going. He was very proud of his works of art. But judging by the expression on the curious woman's face, this portrait made no impression on her at all. Any self-respecting family had portraits of its members in various guises and ages, but they had no artistic value. But painting and landscape? That's a completely different matter. Of course there are other paintings. You could even spread them on your bread. One of these masterpieces, by the way, was painted by a girl whom Alex called his daughter. And he invited those who wanted to come to his office to have a look. The guests began to whisper. What kind of daughter, after all? There were only sons in the Dispenser family. Apparently, Alex was talking about Felix's fiancée. Aaron realized what he was talking about. He was there too, and heard that the Viscount loved Raina as his own daughter. Rumors had already reached the social circles, so perhaps many came today purely out of curiosity. Apparently, the Viscount not only wanted to brag, he was simply delighted. And even the Duke was surprised by the excitement the new painting caused among the guests. But he was in no hurry to watch it and settled down comfortably in the hallway with a glass of wine. And Aaron, too. What can you do? He also became curious to see that very picture that everyone around is talking about. Aaron left the room, he smiled and promised to return soon. Still, he felt awkward leaving his friend alone, but curiosity and a sense of beauty prevailed. Oops. While talking to the Duke, Aaron completely didn't notice how he bumped into a petite and very cute girl, almost knocking her off her feet. It was Raina. She and Aaron exchanged apologies, after which the girl wished him a pleasant stay at the Dispenser estate. What luck! This is the same girl who painted the picture. Aaron was very happy and said that he was just going to look at her work. When Raina learned that a whole crowd would be watching her painting, she was overcome with horror. The girl was very afraid that the nobles present would criticize her painting. The girl turned around like a fiery whirlwind and rushed to the Viscount's office, where her painting was located. She didn't yet know what exactly she was going to do, but first she had to get ahead of the guests. Bursting into the office, the girl was almost stunned. Not this. The worst thing that could happen at this moment had happened. She was late. A broad smile lit up the Viscount's face as soon as he saw his daughter-in-law, because he was just about to call her to introduce the author of this work to the guests. And indeed, a whole crowd of people had gathered around the painting. If a few minutes ago they had been looking at the canvas, now their appraising glances were directed at its author. What would all these people say? Raina held her breath. Drumroll. Of course, not everyone will appreciate Raina's work, but if they suddenly start criticizing, the girl didn't know how to behave. Imagine Raina's genuine surprise when she heard that her work was truly amazing. And it was not just anyone who praised the girl's work, but Count Atlee himself, who had refined taste and exceptional knowledge of painting. This man knew everything about art. Moreover, the inspired Count had already given a whole lecture on the expressive brushstrokes, rich color palette, and other technical nuances that make this work exceptional. The painting was impressive. It took less than a year to create. The canvas is painted in warm colors. It simply radiates joy. This amazing work reflects the bright soul of the person who painted it. Through the image, the artist tries to give a piece of happiness to those who look at this painting. Indeed, the ladies present noted that when they looked at the painting of the Viscount's daughter-in-law, all their worries seemed to evaporate. This work is incredible. A maid entered the room with a huge tray of homemade cookies. The Viscount was pleased to present another work to the attention of his dear guests. Cookies. Wow, the young lady herself made them. The guests were so surprised by the pastries prepared by the Viscount's daughter-in-law, as if they had been brought from another planet. Usually noble ladies do not do home baking, but perhaps Raina is trying to show her creativity in this way, because a talented person is talented in everything. But in fact, she is just used to cooking and baking in her previous family. And now someone's hand reached out to the tray to try this deliciousness. Wow, how delicious. It was Duke Lloyd. Cornwall, and once he took a small bite, there was no stopping him. Continuing to stuff his mouth with cookies despite the surprised looks of his guests, the Duke, either jokingly or in all seriousness, noted that no one in his family knew how to do anything like that. Everyone froze as if something had happened. But in reality, people just didn't want to crowd around, and everyone was waiting for their turn to try the cookies that Raina had baked. And so one of the ladies present took the cookies for tasting. She did not know what to expect, since in other families only the cooks did the baking. After taking a small bite, the woman literally froze in delight. She said nothing, since it was impolite to speak with a full mouth, but the expression on her face only said that the cookie was truly incredibly delicious. Wow. Now everyone understood why the Duke praised Raina's pastries so much. Surely, if he hadn't said so, no one would have tried them. The noble ladies began to literally bombard Raina with questions about what recipe she was using. Maybe she had a secret ingredient or some magical powers. One way or another, everyone was eager to learn this incredible recipe to pass it on to their cooks. The girl literally blossomed with happiness. Of course, she will gladly share her recipe with everyone who wants it. The Duke smiled. How nice it was to see Raina. Carried away by her favorite things, she literally transformed before our eyes. Sometime later, there was no trace of the previous shyness. Raina gave a lecture on home baking, like a natural orator. It turns out that she has no secret ingredients, however, as well as magical abilities. The main thing is to strictly observe the proportions and do everything with love. The girl caught herself thinking that perhaps this would sound a little unfair to other artists, but one must have an innate attraction to painting. However, talent is not just an intuitive sense of style. It is hard work and constant work on technique with small details. Leaving the office, the girl lingered for a second at the door and accidentally overheard the continuation of the discussion about her painting. The Count noted that in this case, it was a real talent, and it was very good when someone noticed and encouraged it. Indeed, the Dispenser family noted from the first days that Raina was a very talented artist and supported her in every possible way. The girl did not even know how to express such enormous gratitude, but there is no doubt that she will definitely come up with a way to please the new parents. Yes, of course. Eavesdropping on other people's conversations is indecent. But firstly, Raina heard everything purely by accident. And secondly, this conversation concerned her personally. And she was so pleased that she already forgot where she was going. Nothing inspires new achievements like praise from loving people. Raina simply glowed with happiness like a little sun, warming everything around with her rays. Now all the worries were behind her. Oh, how nice it is to just sit in the fresh air in the evening and just think about life. about future plans. And even better, not to think at all, but just enjoy the evening coolness. And here comes Felix. How wonderful to see the bride so happy in the moonlight. The first thing Felix did was ask if his bride was tired, and meanwhile he carefully took the glass of wine from her. Apparently, the groom was also concerned that Beeline was not drinking heavily. Probably today was the first time the girl had to meet so many people, and Felix was very interested in how the day went and how she withstood all of today's tests. Raina's index finger rose up, and all the seriousness of her expression indicated that she was about to tell a very long story. But instead, the girl burst into her ringing, bell-like laughter. In fact, she was having a lot of fun. But the one who was not in the mood for fun was Felix. He was impatiently waiting for everyone to leave. It turned out that the girl was worried in vain. Everything turned out to be much simpler. And she was also interested in how long the Duke's visit would last. Oh, that Duke. How Felix wished he would leave as soon as possible. But alas, he planned to stay for a whole month. However, Raina was sure that the Duke liked it here very much, and she asked Felix not to hold a grudge against his dear friend, because today he really helped out his bride. Seriously? Did the narcissistic Duke of Cornwall finally do something useful? Felix was genuinely surprised. Raina didn't want to hide from him that the moment the Viscount started talking about the cookies she had baked, it was obvious that the atmosphere had become tense. Artistic activity was traditionally a common thing for an aristocrat, but not everyone was keen on cooking. Baking was also a form of art for Raina. This could be seen in the way she spoke passionately about the process of cooking and the subsequent reactions of the guests. But if it weren't for the Duke, who was the first to taste the cookies and tell those around him about it, the Viscount could have found himself in an awkward situation. By the way, the Duke was also very helpful at the festival when he turned Roxy down. Raina hoped that someday she would be able to thank him properly. She would certainly be very happy if she had the opportunity to help. The next day, while walking in the garden, Felix heard strange sounds and hurried to see what was going on there. It was the Duke of Lloyd Cornwall who was preparing for the morning ride. He was a great horseman. When the Duke heard a word of gratitude from Felix, he was even a little confused. During their entire friendship, Lloyd was used to hearing only complaints and reproaches from him. It was truly unexpected. The Duke even got goosebumps. He was very pleased, and he tried to hide it, but to be honest, it didn't work out so well. I wanted to thank you for that incident with the cookies. Felix laughed. The Duke noted to himself that his friendship with Raina was having a positive effect on the Viscount's son. At least he began to laugh much more often. But in response to the gratitude, the confused Duke looked at Felix as if he were a fool. This was very strange, since Lloyd did not even think that he would ever be thanked here again. "You're such a bore," the Duke breathed, mounting his horse and still trying to look indifferent. "But you know, I like to hear such words from you." The Duke could not resist returning the compliment, smiled, and galloped away. The Duke's morning ride had done him good, and he was now relaxing in his chair, enjoying the start of a new day. But Felix, on the contrary, was somehow sour from the very morning. His whole appearance expressed anxiety. He simply had no face. And all because a terrible event happened, which Aaron reported while reading the latest newspaper. There was another fatal accident at Lars Oil. The company is always having problems. This is the third incident in a month. They didn't even pay compensation to the families of the victims. The Duke was also upset. And in the meantime, Raina brought tea that she had just brewed to somehow soften the atmosphere of mourning. Felix couldn't understand how it was possible in our time that for this large company, workers were like slaves. These families don't stand a chance. Corruption is thriving there like a weed, Aaron noted philosophically, and there was nothing that could be done about it. Looking at his own reflection in his teacup, the Duke reflected that people who had never wanted for anything could not understand those who barely made ends meet. They simply could not understand the price of 5 shillings. It was embarrassing to admit, but it would be hard for rich people to lose their wealth. However, the Duke was generous enough to donate large sums to charity. The future newlyweds thought about the same thing. Even though society has changed, its structure remains the same, which is why there must be a clear policy. The law was supposed to protect the working class, and Felix even had some ideas on how to improve the social situation of the people. But easier said than done. Aaron was right. Any law has its supporters and opponents, but in any case, there will be a negative reaction. Of course, power is given to regulate such problems, but you can't eat this statement. It seems that the dialogue was gradually reaching a dead end, since no new ideas were emerging, and there weren't many opportunities for implementation. Felix was so firm in his conviction, he showed strength of character and self-confidence. Raina herself lacked these qualities, so she valued them very much in others. It was difficult to come to any conclusion, so the Duke asked what Lady Raina thought about it. The girl thought again. Of course, she was from a noble family, but she did not receive the benefits that her older sister enjoyed. So Raina felt more like a representative of the working class. The Duke decided that the girl was bored discussing politics with them, but in fact, she was very keen on the conversation and had her own opinion on the matter. Of course, Raina didn't believe that anyone was interested in her opinion, but from you, if she was asked directly and expected to answer, then she would be happy to share her views and ideas on this matter. The Duke listened with rapture to Raina's speech. He always welcomed new views. Where to begin? The girl faced many of the problems inherent to the working class, from lack of money to disdain from high society. But she also saw opportunities to resolve these problems. Well, well. The Duke felt Felix's sidelong glance. It seemed the groom was a little jealous of Raina's friend. But if Felix found this situation unpleasant, Raina, on the contrary, was engrossed in a conversation with the Duke. This contradiction complicated their relationship somewhat, but nothing could be done. As long as the Duke was here, they would have to put up with it. The heated discussion was interrupted by the approaching clatter of hooves and the clatter of wheels. Who could it be? It seemed that late guests had arrived. Judging by the size of the carriage, which from the outside looked more like a freight car, the whole family arrived at once. And so I, the late guests, Raina, broke out in a cold sweat. She realized that now her day, which had started so well, was hopelessly ruined. Those sly, narrowed eyes, that sarcastic, hypocritical smile, that languid, snake-like posture. Raina recognized her immediately. It was Catherine herself. Homewood, what an honor. The Duke himself came out to greet the dear guests, probably thought those who arrived. But in fact, Lloyd Cornwall was just out for a walk with friends, and unexpected guests literally fell on his head. Oh my God, Duke Lloyd Cornwall. How many years? How many winters? How you have grown. The last time we saw each other, you were up to my waist. Walter noted the rate of Lloyd's growth. By the way, the Duke also noted that Raina's father had also grown, and decently, but only in width. But naturally, he did not speak about it out loud. The Duke's forced smile looked almost believable. He tried his best to portray his joy at the arrival of his guests. When Felix inquired how long Homewood planned to stay, they immediately changed the subject, noting that they had come to further strengthen their friendship. Homewood, they are Raina's relatives. The Duke finally realized what was going on. But judging by the expression on Felix's face, it seemed that he was ready to kill. So the Duke returned to Raina's parents and began to shower her with compliments about how talented she was and how deeply she thought, which was a clear reason for pride. What? Raina? Oh, yeah. Walter did not expect such bright praise for his daughter and even coughed a little, but waved his mane like an obedient pony. I've never seen such a smart girl before. The Duke didn't let up while Felix turned and walked away. He had no business being in this company. This is a problem. Felix, I didn't think they would come here. Nobody invited them. I need to somehow tell my father about this. Hey, where are you going? Her older sister appeared behind Raina like a predatory gargoyle. Your parents haven't seen you for a long time. You should meet them soon. What are you standing there for? Go to them already. Roxy pumped in a commanding tone. In reality, Roxy just needed Raina to be by her side so she could spend more time with the Duke. It was very unusual for the father to hear so many compliments about his youngest daughter. It wasn't that he wasn't used to talking about her in a positive way. He basically never talked about her. And here is Raina, my lovely daughter. The father squeezed out, trying with all his might to portray how much he missed his daughter, whom he had recently sold to another family against her will. You were so kind to her shortcomings. I think you, Raina, should thank the Duke, her father said, as if he considered Raina to be an inferior person. And the girl seemed as small as a bread potato against a stale loaf of bread. Put it down in your head, the girl didn't utter a sound. She was very embarrassed to say anything in the presence of her real parents. What awkwardness hung in the air. The conversation hadn't even really begun, but it already resembled a theatrical performance with the most talentless actors in the world. Catherine decided to change the subject again. Now she wanted to talk about the children, because her son Maurice studied at the same academy as the younger ones, but could not come because of lessons. The Duke at first could not figure out who exactly Catherine was talking about, but Felix told him that she meant Eden and Joffrey. Homewood couple had high hopes that Lloyd Cornwall will be able to see their son, who, according to them, was so engrossed in his studies that he could not even visit his parents. They positioned the swearing boy as a very capable guy, but the Duke had his own opinion on this matter. In principle, the Duke still had some business to attend to at the academy, so he could very well see Maurice there. Although, wait, the Duke's affairs arose in the first academy, and Eden and Joffrey, and consequently Maurice, studied in the second academy. Yes, in that case, Lloyd's meeting Cornwall and Maurice never happened, but the Duke was not upset about it. Rather, on the contrary, he breathed a sigh of relief. Catherine Homewood mistakenly decided that Maurice, like Felix, studied at the first academy, but in fact, everything was completely different. And while Catherine was collecting her thoughts, Felix and Lloyd had already forgotten what she was telling them. In that case, he should have said that he was studying at the second academy. Raina should have told the Duke about Maurice to spread rumors about their friendly relationship. So it was necessary to find out which academy Felix studies at, then send his son there, preferably so that this blockhead fails the entrance exam, then spread rumors about their friendship, after which they should become friends. And then it's not far to family friendship. From such a plan, Catherine's fragile brain, Homewood, almost melted. But instead of getting under the Dispenser family's skin and helping her real parents, Raina joined the foster family and enjoyed life. Catherine gritted her teeth at the blatant injustice. Meanwhile, Raina silently looked at the floor. She was lost in her own thoughts, and the dialogue between her parents and the Duke sounded like a distant echo to her. The Viscount appeared out of breath on the threshold. He had not been warned about Homewood's visit, so he had to run to meet the guests. However, it was normal for Homewood to show up unannounced. Raina still stood in her mother's shadow, looking down as if the saddest play in the world was being performed on Earth. The Viscount immediately noticed that something was wrong with his adopted daughter. Just recently, she shared her baking recipe with everyone and smiled, and now she withered like an autumn leaf. Alex suggested not to stand outside, but to go inside, since the guests still needed to unpack their luggage, after which he would lead them to a room where they could settle down and rest after a long journey. Viscount and Felix looked at each other. It seemed they were thinking the same thing, that no one in this house was particularly happy with uninvited guests. Felix suggested that Raina go inside the house, as she had been outside for a long time, where there was a strong wind and she could catch a cold in such a thin dress. Raina, how rude of you. You should help us too. The older sister appeared behind her again. Apparently, she missed her favorite pastime, loading Raina with work and watching her work until exhaustion. Number, there is no need for that. Your father will take you there. Or do you think that everyone around you should serve you? Felix barely managed to keep his tone calm as he put his arm around Raina's shoulders and led her into the house. How dare you say such a thing? Roxy tried to curb another sudden burst of rage, but looking around, she found herself alone on the porch. The tired appearance of the bride worried Felix, and he suggested that she go and rest. But it was not fatigue that was the issue. In reality, Raina just wanted to show that she had become independent from the opinions of her former family, but it seems she wasn't very good at it yet. Felix's bride was a real miracle. He held her tightly to himself and still insisted that she rest. He was even ready to bring dinner to the room, but Raina decided to dine with everyone. Sir, the Duke is waiting for you. The maid's voice suddenly rang out. It seemed like it was time for a serious conversation. And you really had to come. Felix burst into the Duke's room so suddenly that he almost choked on his tea. The Duke at first did not understand the reason for such sudden aggression of Felix, but he explained to him that not only Lloyd came on vacation, but also brought all sorts of people with him. But the Duke himself did not know that there would be so many people. He just expected to spend the vacation calmly with his friends. Felix's concerns were not in vain, because if something like this were to happen, if the uninvited guests continued to behave as brazenly and unceremoniously as they did today, then the house would have to be closed to visitors. But the Duke had only just unpacked his luggage, had not yet had time to look around and enjoy the company of his friends, when he immediately received a reprimand. It was offensive. For the first time in the history of their long-standing friendship, Felix pissed off Lloyd Cornwall, so much so that he blushed. Usually it was the other way around. Lloyd Cornwall sat down on the sofa, took a deep breath, and closed his eyes. He needed to be patient and think about his next steps, and it was all somehow strange. The Duke caught himself thinking that until the morning the atmosphere was favorable, but as soon as Homewood arrived, everything changed, despite the fact that they were Raina's relatives. Everything looked completely different from what the Duke had originally imagined, and now he had to figure out what was really going on in this family. The atmosphere at the dinner table was cheerful and relaxed. Those gathered discussed political news, talked about the weather, and the Duke told funny stories from his life. And that's all. Roxy sat there looking gloomy as a thundercloud. She hadn't really had a chance to talk to the Duke before dinner began. Roxy's snake nature was still unknown to Aaron, so he decided to get to know her better and asked her to voice her opinion on one important issue. The Duke was also interested in hearing fresh ideas, so he politely paused in his long story. "Lady Roxy, what do you think about financial compensation for the families of those killed in accidents?" Aaron's question made the audience perk up. Felix and his fiancée advocated for the ruling class to provide financial assistance to the families of the dead. Aaron believed that this had its pitfalls. The Duke has not yet expressed his position. And why on earth should we help them, the ruling class? We're not a charity. Roxy laughed. Looking haughtily through a glass of wine at the lovers, Roxy thought that Raina was incredibly stupid, and Felix was really nothing special. However, these two thought alike, which meant they should get along well. Slowly sipping her wine, Roxy was filled with a sense of satisfaction, completely unaware that those around her were simply stunned by her behavior and such a selfish point of view. The maestro struck the keys and the Duke's favorite composition began. He had already drained his glass of wine and was now eager to dance. Seeing that Lady Raina had no partner, the Duke kindly invited her to dance. Unfortunately, Raina didn't know how to dance at all, but the Duke took it upon himself and promised to show her a couple of moves, and the girl immediately cheered up. Those around him also decided to follow the Duke's example, rose from their seats and began to joke that since the Duke had immediately invited the bride Felix to dance, the groom would have to look for a new partner. Meanwhile, finishing her glass of wine, Roxy did not understand at all why everyone had run away. After all, she had only just started to give her speech about the exclusivity of the melting class. Aaron covered his face with his hand. Although he was not familiar with Roxy, he was already ashamed of her behavior. And yet there had been such a nice discussion. "What's wrong with that?" "They asked me," I answered. Roxy snorted. "Well, it's a truism that when you express your opinion, you have to respect others' opinions. Isn't that what we're taught from a young age?" Aaron remarked. Roxy turned away. She had no desire to continue this pointless conversation, especially since she still didn't understand why she had to agree with anyone. What if the Duke shares Roxy's opinion about the inappropriateness of monetary compensation, since he hasn't spoken out yet? I'll have to explain myself to him when the opportunity arises. And the opportunity presented itself immediately. The Duke took the initiative, approached Roxy, and asked her to dance. Well, personally, Lloyd Cornwall invites Lady Roxy to dance. Finally, everything went according to her script, and events began to develop exactly as she wanted. But in fact, the Duke's plan was not to leave Roxy alone with Raina, because she might again be rude and spoil the mood of his friend's fiancé. Raina breathed a sigh of relief. The company of her older sister had tired her out considerably, and now she would be able to rest from her for at least a few minutes. Don't take Roxy's words to heart. Noticing that Raina had become somewhat depressed after the unpleasant conversation, a new interlocutor approached her, whose company was much more comfortable for the girl. Wise Aaron understood Raina's feelings very well because he, the Lord, also had an older brother with whom they were at odds. Sometimes it even seemed that they were from different families. And here Felix loomed on the horizon, and at the sight of his smiling friends, his mood also noticeably improved. Although these two, Duke Lloyd and Count Aaron, were annoying Felix, they really helped her out in this situation. First, the Duke distracted her annoying sister, and then the Count cheered her up with a warm word. That's what friends are for. Still puzzled by why everyone was so angry at her, Roxy began to complain to the Duke because she had simply answered a question. In response, the Duke only smiled. Oh well, the opinions of others didn't matter at this point. Roxy was on cloud 9, having been invited to dance by Duke Lloyd himself, Cornwall. Apparently, he didn't convey much of the meaning of her words. It was time to focus on the dance, And it was the perfect moment to ask the Duke the big question. When are you planning to get married? Roxy decided to ask the Duke directly, especially since this topic was very much discussed among socialite ladies. I might just win your heart. At these words, the Duke's eyes widened and his face lengthened a little. The next second, the Duke burst out laughing. Oh, to tell the truth, he was, of course, flattered that Roxy and the other ladies were worried about his family situation. But it turned out that the Duke already had one person in mind, to whom he had made a promise. So, unfortunately for Roxy, and fortunately for the Duke, they could not be together. It happens, no one knew about the existence of the bride. But the main thing is that it was not Roxy. Roxy's face turned as red as a beetroot just pulled out of the black soil when she heard that the Duke already had a bride. This ruined all plans, and she and her mother did not sleep that night, thinking about how to lasso the precious Duke. True, no one had ever seen the Duke's bride, but he insisted that there were reasons for that. Lloyd Cornwall smiled as if nothing had happened. When Roxy returned to her room, she roared like a buffalo. She asked her mother to pack her things and leave as soon as possible, because she could not stay there any longer. Catherine Homewood hadn't yet realized the seriousness of the situation. She hadn't even had time to have breakfast. Do you even understand what happened? The Duke turned me down. I don't even have time for breakfast right now. Roxy screamed. Now she realized that their plan to seduce the Duke had gone downhill. But instead of feeling sorry for her eldest daughter, the mother pounced on her like an anaconda. She shouldn't have confessed to the Duke. It was a huge stupidity. And why did Roxy do that? Her mother was perplexed. She told her to just be friends with the Duke. Is it really so hard not to do what is not asked, if you are not deprived of brains? Catherine Homewood was so desperate that she was probably ready to marry the Duke herself. Gritting her teeth, Roxy continued to listen to the angry mother's pecks until she dropped the glass, which fell to the floor with a clang, breaking into 100 pieces. Raina came to check on the guests after hearing her older sister's screams and the sound of breaking glass. But for Roxy, it was a perfect excuse to vent her anger. When Raina asked what was wrong, Roxy growled that it was none of her business. But since she was there, she had to clean up after her older sister, like she had done her entire adult life. You don't have to ask me for that anymore. It's not my job anymore. I'll call the maid. Raina snapped. Hearing these words, the already angry Roxy finally lost her temper. No, just look at her. She's even cheeky. If you're told to do something, then do it. And the next moment, Roxy swung her arm to hit her little sister in the face with all her might. But as soon as Roxy raised her hand, someone's stronger hand grabbed her wrist right out of the air. It was Joffrey. He hugged Raina tightly and was not going to let anyone hurt her, even especially her former relatives. To be honest, Raina was a little scared by Joffrey, who had suddenly appeared. Since their last meeting, he had grown a little more, and now he looked even more mature and masculine. Mind your own business. This is a family matter. Roxy grimaced. She was clearly not happy that Raina had a protector. Joffrey's indignation knew no bounds. Not only were family matters resolved through peaceful dialogue and his system of coordinates, but Raina was no longer part of the Homewood family. She was a member of the Dispenser family. If anyone could have family matters with her, it would be the Dispenser family. Why don't I raise my hands? Don't slander me. Roxy tried to justify herself, but she had already ruined her reputation from the start, showing herself to be a thief and a liar. And now she had also shown disrespect for her younger sister. And how can you still call yourself a benevolent lady? Joffrey said with disdain. You might get into trouble for saying that. Roxy screamed and turned red again like a boiling samovar. And who will I get it from? My parents or your beloved Duke? Joffrey asked sarcastically. But this joke became a prick in Roxy's Achilles heel. You just know that you lost to a 15-year-old. Joffrey then stuck out his tongue and made a face, just like a little child after all, he was not yet fully an adult. Joffrey took Raina by the hand and led her into the fresh air, away from the evil older sister, who continued to shout something after them, but no one listened to her empty threats. It was a good thing Roxy didn't tag along. Once outside, Raina breathed a sigh of relief. She felt much more at ease in the company of her new stepbrother than with her older sister. It seems that this was too much. That is, Raina was again worried that Joffrey was very rude to Roxy. But he did not think so, since due to her bad manners, she lost her temper in any incomprehensible situation. Next time, don't be afraid to show who's boss. See you later. Joffrey smiled, waved goodbye, and went off to do his business. Raina's hand also rose into the air. The girl was very grateful to Joffrey for protecting her. Everything will be fine now. And yet, left alone in the rays of the setting sun, the girl thought. In fact, she was not at all sure that everything would be all right. Duke of Lloyd Cornwall and Earl Arryn are good people, and the new family has done a lot for Raina. But now the girl is wondering what she can do without them. Raina couldn't hide behind the backs of others forever, especially from her own relatives, who first threw her out of their lives, and now began to crawl into her life like flies in jam. The girl looked up, her eyes full of confidence. True, while she was thinking that she should be more careful, she didn't notice at all how it got dark outside. But from this very moment, from today onwards, Raina simply has to change. The girl gathered her thoughts and headed back to the house. However, it was now obvious that even in small things, such as her gait or facial expression, there was absolutely no trace of the old and trembling Raina, who was afraid of everything, because the feeling of support from loved ones made her more courageous. Meanwhile, Catherine Homewood and Roxy reached the Viscount's office and stared at the painting painted by Raina, trying to find something beautiful in it. Catherine finally announced her verdict, completely unaware that the work had actually been painted by her own daughter. I should have married the Viscount. If I had known then, you would have been sent instead of Raina, and then your dad and I would be living here. Catherine whined, almost in tears. Homewood, but Roxy didn't want to get married. Moreover, she considered the Viscount a complete idiot, and when he sent a proposal of marriage, she personally insisted that it was her younger sister who was sent. How could it be otherwise? You still haven't received a marriage proposal. Catherine exploded with a furious scream. Homewood. She couldn't allow her eldest daughter to be left without a rich groom. Looks like Catherine Homewood had made her decision too quickly, and now she knew it. Now she was biting her nails like a teenager who had realized she had done something stupid. This Duke Lloyd Cornwall. No matter how much Roxy runs after him, he pays no attention to her, and she is already 20 years old. If things continue like this, Catherine Homewood will lose a lot of money. However, it didn't matter now. I would definitely need to talk to Raina. Raina. This word gave Roxy allergy attacks. Who would have thought that she would envy her younger sister with such black envy? Everything that Raina now has should have belonged to Roxy. At least she thought so. But due to her own stupidity, she found herself at a dead end, while her younger sister got the best of everything. Roxy only had to think about the Viscount's money and the fact that it would be spent not by her, but by her younger sister. And she began to tremble. A panic attack almost made Roxy lose control again, so she decided to go out into the hallway to get some fresh air and take a walk. Who knew that this huge house, all this money, connections, and everything else, should actually belong to Roxy? But she personally gave up this golden life. While passing by the dining room, Roxy overheard a conversation and decided to stop to eavesdrop. It seemed that the conversation was about money. Of course, when gold, crisp paper, tugricks, and other forms of money were discussed, Roxy was right there. There have been rumors about the Viscount lately that his business is currently on the rise, and his fortune should increase many times over in the near future. The guests were very surprised when they learned that the already rich Viscount wanted to become even richer. In addition, he is actively involved in charity. How quickly information spreads. It seems that the influx of rumors made the Viscount very happy. But in truth, there was a compelling reason for his active work. The fact is that, as everyone knows, the Viscount has a daughter-in-law, and at the moment his finances are not enough to provide her and his future grandchildren with a luxurious life. So, part of the inheritance will also go to the Viscount's daughter-in-law. The guests were simply delighted and generally even a little envious of his daughter-in-law. That's right. The Viscount has already decided. The luxurious villas owned by the Dispenser family will be given to Raina. And since she really enjoys painting, Alex would like her not to think about the costs. Evelay, in turn, said that it would be nice to teach Raina how to manage a business so that in the future she could manage her finances as efficiently as possible. But in any case, the Dispenser family will actively support any endeavor of this child. Hearing what unearthly riches the Viscount planned to shower his daughter-in-law with, Roxy sighed hopelessly and sank down on the seat. Her older sister would have all this, but not her. Wait a minute. There is one reason why there have been no official statements so far. They haven't married Felix yet. So all is not lost. Roxy jumped up. Inspired. Now she knew what to do. She rushed to new achievements because she had a fresh idea. The dining room gradually emptied, the guests went about their business, and only the sun's rays played on the surfaces of the furniture. Raina was a little tired, but she would have to endure a couple more days until everyone finally left. And if the girl began to enjoy receiving dear guests, Felix was impatiently waiting for their departure. Her eyes were closing. The girl felt that all these endless excursions and conversations about life in high society had tired her out considerably. Felix noticed that his bride yawned and suggested that she go upstairs and rest, but Raina did not want to go anywhere, since the Duke still wanted to play a game together. Well, you can play next time, no one will be offended. Joffrey appeared again suddenly, like a jack-in-the-box, illuminating those present with his radiant smile. Felix will take care of everything, the guests, the entertainment, and the treats. Joffrey was eager to talk to Raina. Besides, something had happened at the academy, and he really wanted to brag. Felix was left alone with the remaining guests. As long as Raina was around, he could tolerate it. Now that she was gone, he would have to become the center of attention. And how nice it would be to go upstairs and rest a little, even if the Duke complained. Felix hoped that no one would sit down next to him and start a tiresome dialogue. Felix smiled and leaned back in his chair, dreaming of the upcoming vacation, which was not destined to begin, because a woman approached him. "Why are you alone today? Are you waiting for the Duke?" No way. It was Lady Roxy who came because she couldn't wait to start implementing her insidious plan. "Can I sit down for a moment?" Roxy asked, although there was no point in asking when she was already perched dangerously close to Felix. And why, in the presence of Roxy, Felix felt unbearable irritation and disgust, as if right in the middle of dinner it was not a girl who sat down next to him, but a bag of manure. Felix's hand automatically reached for the glass of wine. He already knew in advance that what Roxy was going to say would be unbearable to listen to with a sober head. In turn, Roxy decided that Felix was very nervous because he was sitting next to such a beauty as her. Well, in that case, he should quickly fall in love. Aren't you disappointed? Roxy decided to go the extra mile and convince Felix that Raina was not his match. A questioning look instantly pierced the girl like a shot arrow. Felix did not understand what she was talking about at all. "A smart man like you could find a more suitable match," Roxy whispered, moving smoothly towards her younger sister's fiancé. Felix still stubbornly did not understand what this nasty woman wanted from him, what she was talking about, and in general what this whole dialogue was about. Isn't Raina boring? Life is too short for you to waste your time on a boring girl who just does what she's told and has no sense of humor. Roxy said directly about how much she despised her younger sister, thus laying all her cards on the table. Roxy spoke as if she was offering Felix an opportunity he couldn't refuse, an opportunity that would change his life forever, but not necessarily for the better. What possibility are you talking about? Felix gritted his teeth. Now he realized that they wanted to seduce him, but he continued to pretend that he still didn't understand anything. "I know you had no say in this arrangement, so I can help you. Is that why you haven't gotten married yet?" Roxy giggled sarcastically, looking like a sly but beaten fox again. "Why do you think we didn't have a wedding?" Felix asked, and Roxy's smile turned to surprise. Had she really made a mistake in her calculations? "Isn't it obvious? You are the son of a viscount. You were meant to marry someone from my family, so you had to accept this boring girl, but you don't have to worry." Roxy continued to develop her far from intellectual thought. "You can have a wedding with me instead." Roxy stroked Felix's face as if he were her kitten or some other pet. "Come on, tell me it's an honor for you. After all, you're just the son of a viscount," Roxy thought and smiled sarcastically, expecting Felix to happily accept her offer. "No!" Felix's refusal came like a bolt from the blue. Roxy had nothing more to say, so the Viscount's son turned and left without even looking back. "No." How dare he? So brazenly turn down Homewood's eldest daughter. Roxy couldn't believe that was possible. No, he didn't just turn her down, he completely destroyed her the next morning. What a disgusting woman this Roxy is. Felix was so worried that she would approach him again. He was so worried that he didn't notice his fiancée approaching him. But she noticed from you that Felix was a little sad and said the words that she had heard so often from her fiancé lately. "If you're tired, you can go upstairs and rest." Raina's laughter sounded like light, cheerful music to Felix, and his fatigue disappeared as if by magic. And here came the younger ones. They missed him very much, and they couldn't wait to go for a walk with Felix and his bride. Even though they didn't always get along and regularly teased each other, Felix was always happy to see his relatives. But who Felix is not at all happy to see is Roxy, who came up again and asked for a minute of his precious attention. Felix and Roxy left. She called him so calmly, as if it was an ordinary thing. Interesting. You can't just take your fiancé away in the middle of a conversation. Raina wondered what was going on and started to get nervous, enough to bite her thumb. Are you really worried about those two? I'm sure nothing serious happened. Or maybe you're jealous. Joffrey noticed that Raina began to go into her own thoughts and tried to bring her back to reality. To be honest, Raina was a little jealous, just a little bit. She knew Roxy was sly and greedy, but she didn't know what was on her mind at the moment. Meanwhile, Roxy continued to lead her sister's fiancé down the hallway. Felix was already starting to get tired of the conversation that hadn't started yet, and Roxy suddenly remembered the conversation that had taken place the day before. Why are you here alone? Right after Roxy had turned Felix down, the Duke approached her with a puzzled look. I was talking to Lord Felix, Roxy started to say, but quickly realized that the Duke had no need to know this story and fell silent. But still, she remained alone. Aaron was very concerned that Felix had left again without saying a word. From his point of view, he had not paid any attention to his guests who were so eager to talk to him. Indeed, Felix had disappeared again, but even the Duke could do nothing about it. The Viscount's son was like a brother to him, and Lloyd Cornwall should be above this, so he treated his antics with understanding. Interesting. Roxy began to listen. Judging by how serious the Duke's tone had become, he was saying something really important. Felix's behavior cannot be ignored forever. Aaron considered the Duke's frivolous attitude toward his friend unacceptable since they were not even related, and yet Lloyd Cornwall called him his brother. Don't try to find out. It will only hurt you. The Duke covered his face with his hand. He spoke as if he was hiding something from the whole world. Judging by the Duke's answer, the reason is probably hidden in the name written on the blessed blue. Roxy guessed this and decided to get it herself. Now everything will be all right. Another insidious plan started spinning in Roxy's head, and she couldn't wait to implement it. But first she needed to talk to Felix. How far are you going to take me? I thought you wanted to talk, not circle around my house. Felix was already impatient to put an end to these pointless dialogues once and for all. Well, it's time to talk. Roxy turned sharply to Felix, flashing him a dazzling smile. But for some reason, this smile radiated coldness and lies. Raina continued to wind herself up. She felt bad that Felix was devoting so much time to her older sister, as if a part of her body had been torn off. This was a strange feeling that she was experiencing for the first time. Was she really jealous? Yes, the girl couldn't help herself. She was feeling real jealousy. Oh no! Did Raina really say her thoughts out loud? What did she just say? That she was jealous of her fiancé's older sister. What a disgrace. She immediately blushed and covered her mouth with her hands. The brothers exchanged meaningful glances. They did not understand how a girl who was smarter, more beautiful, and better in everything than her sister could be jealous of her fiancé. Wait, are you serious? Joffrey couldn't believe that this was possible. Raina turned away. She was so ashamed. Meanwhile, Roxy appeared before Felix in all her glory. We didn't agree last time, remember? I'll give you another chance to think it over. I know you want it. I want it? You're wrong. What you really mean is that you want it, right? Felix was outraged by how cleverly this girl had put words into his mouth that he hadn't said. You want my family's wealth. Felix saw right through this swindler and poked his finger into Roxy's shoulder, almost piercing her. Roxy's complexion changed like a traffic light. First it was moon white, then it turned a little green, and now it was bright red. But she was silent because there was nothing to say. But Felix had something to say, so he continued. You probably think that this is a marriage of convenience, but it is not. I proposed it myself because I fell in love with Raina first. I don't know where you got these grandiose ideas about yourself, Felix continued, but you had no connection to this situation from the start. Instead of giving an adequate response, Roxy growled like a wild animal. Felix came closer and closer to Roxy and leaned his head towards her face as if he wanted to kiss her. But instead, he whispered, "If it hasn't finally dawned on you, I hope that was the last time you called me like that. This is a waste of time for both of us." Felix waved Roxy away as if she were an annoying fly and walked away. But how could he fall in love with the bride if he bought her for himself? What was he even talking about? Roxy remembered how she personally counted the money, and there was so much of it that the words of love were questioned. What a stupid excuse. Did he really fall in love? Roxy assumed Felix thought he proposed because he liked her. And then after Raina was sent, he got offended. Oh well. Oh, that cheeky snob Felix. Roxy couldn't stand him. So maybe it was for the best that she got rejected. Roxy never wanted to end up a bigger laughingstock than her little sister. But in reality, she's already done so much wrong that her stupidity could be the subject of a comedy show. Why hadn't she thought of this before? Inspired, Roxy jumped up again and ran in the opposite direction. She had a new idea. A husband doesn't have to be a jerk. Felix, the Viscount, has 3 sons. Roxy could have that short one. She didn't remember his name, but she remembered that he was of age and ready to get married. Oh, how wonderful it would be to have that much money. That is, a husband who had that much money. True, there was another younger son, but he was too rude and immature. He almost broke Roxy's arm when she tried to remove Raina because she didn't want to clean her room. Roxy had entered her younger sister's room without even noticing. What a strange coincidence. Well, since she was here, it was time to take a look around. Oops. Without even noticing it, Roxy took her younger sister's dress and started trying it on. Did Raina really think this outfit suited her? Roxy was bigger and, most importantly, wider than her younger sister. So her dress didn't look weird. It was literally bursting at the seams. But that's okay. The main thing is that Raina didn't get it. Father's business had gone bust. Just recently, he had been sitting bent over his last sack of gold like a leprechaun. Of course, the money he had gotten from Raina had improved his financial situation considerably, but it was being spent too quickly, and Roxy was sure that her father would leave the crumbs of the family fortune to that idiot Maurice, who would undoubtedly spend every penny on gambling and other trifles. Well, hold on, Dispenser brothers. In that case, Roxy will have to find a way out again by seducing one of them. What were they talking about? What could Raina's handsome fiancé talk about with her older sister? The girl felt even more anxious because Roxy had not returned yet, but Felix came back and even managed to sip some tea. Raina was so lost in her thoughts that she didn't notice her fiancé approaching her. "Hey, Raina." The girl jumped when Felix addressed her. She was so scared, as if she was about to be bitten or eaten. "Oh, I just mean, in the morning, you and Roxy?" The girl, she felt very insecure and stupid, so she could not put 2 words together. "Nothing serious. She just asked me to look after her brother." Felix waved off. And yet the girl had looked very worried just recently. She had blushed, having found herself in an awkward situation when she had said out loud in front of his brothers that she was jealous, and the blush was still on her cheeks. "Were you worried about me, Raina?" Felix felt a puzzled look on him. It wasn't just worry. When people are just worried, they usually don't blush. So what could it be? Maybe the girl was jealous? Felix understood everything. He found it very cute, but nevertheless, since for him now there was only Raina. Yes. "That's right," Raina exploded. "I was worried that Roxy might say something rude to you." "You should worry about me. Since you both left me without saying a word, you are so mean, you ran away from me, and now you sit and have fun." The Duke appeared so suddenly, as if he had fallen from the sky. Raina was happy about this, but Felix, not so much. It so happens that the Duke is all alone here. And where has Lord Aaron gone? His child is ill. This morning he received a telegram and left. The Duke scratched his chin. Raina learned that Aaron's child had health problems. She was horrified. "We will gladly do everything possible. Just tell us." But everything was fine with the child. In fact, it was just an excuse to quickly go to his wife. In short, Lord Aaron's wife wanted him to come home quickly. It seemed she missed him very much. She's just like Felix, who can't wait to see Lady Raina. The Duke smiled childishly. Of course, he couldn't miss the opportunity to tease his friend a little more. "Perhaps you should have gone with Lord Aaron," Felix exploded. Yes, of course, the Duke would have something to say to his bride. He did not know it himself, but he asked his friend to have pity on him. That's why you should have gone to your fiancé and not here. Felix continued his attack. The Duke, in turn, was surprised that his friend was not worried about him at all. Of course, Felix didn't care about the Duke. The only person he cared about was his fiancée, Raina, because they were together and because they were happy. Felix asked and kissed her hand tenderly. Right, probably. I just remembered that I have business. Allow me to leave. The girl jumped up like a grasshopper, trying not to show her embarrassment, but it was given away by a new blush on her cheeks. Her fiancé kissed Raina's hand. It was so unexpected and so nice. But she didn't know what to do next, so she just panicked and ran away. The door slammed shut. Raina ran away, and the friends were left alone in the huge room. How sweet. The Duke was about to tease his friend about his runaway fiancée, but Felix didn't pay any attention. He just smiled as clearly as his fiancée Raina. Ah, crazy. I'm just saying she's a sweetheart. People might think you want to keep her all to yourself, mind you. Don't get your hopes up. The Duke hit the nail on the head. Felix might have been exaggerating, but Raina's presence alone was enough for him. He was overprotective and couldn't help himself. Well, in a sense, the Duke of Mountain shared his friend's feelings, because he thought exactly the same about his fiancée Charlotte. Here, Felix caught him out, and now Lloyd had no right to tease him about his fiancée. By the way, why didn't the Duke tell his best friend about his bride? After all, Felix thought he knew everything about him. And then such a surprise. You know everything about me? The Duke did not believe that this was possible, because he was a multifaceted and comprehensively developed personality, and it was not easy to study him. You know me very well. Lloyd even felt a little embarrassed, and still Felix had never thought about his bride. But there was no need for an investigation. Felix and Lloyd spent a lot of time together, so Felix learned all this naturally. The Duke even blushed a little. But if his feelings for his bride are similar to Felix's, then he should be more careful. The thing is, the Duke's reputation is such that he lets everyone come and go. He should watch his behavior better. Felix talked about it leisurely over a cup of tea, and it was unclear whether he was joking or being completely serious. What kind of image is this? It's not fair, and it was a long time ago, and it's not true at all. Do you even think of me like that? Lloyd was so indignant and sat down on the floor. Well, you often leave banquets in the company of different ladies. Usually they are Charlotte's friends, but they complain that they want to marry anyone. Felix continued to share his observations. The girls whined and asked to be set up with some nice guys, but the rumors said something completely different. Oh, these rumors, where can you escape them? The Duke won't change, even if he just complains to his friend. Well, at least Felix should know about his pain. So the stakes went up another 5 shillings. Raina sat at the table, holding the cards in her hands, and judging by the expression on her face, the tension was at its peak. You can only have fun if you risk a lot of money, laughed Joffrey. But for that amount, you could buy 10 eggs and a sack of potatoes, thought Raina. The girl had just learned the rules, but everyone at the gaming table was so serious that she didn't want to lose face. And she wanted to show Felix that she could play well. She saw that they were not raising the stakes too much, and all because she was a newbie, but she couldn't back down. The cards were laid on the table, and it turned out that Raina had won. What a sudden outcome. Well, what can you do? Beginners are lucky, and someone will have to part with a certain amount of money. And that someone was the Duke, who couldn't beat Raina in tandem with Joffrey. It looks like the pair are going to bankrupt him today. If you keep losing, you'll have to live here with us, Duke of Cornwall. Laughed Eden, who, by the way, was very happy to see a new winner at this table. Hello, can I take a moment of your precious time? Roxy came over, probably bringing another round of nonsense with her. And the day had started off so well. I have something very important to talk to you about, and I would be grateful if you would do me this honor. Roxy insisted that Eden leave his friends and go with her. This dress. Indignant Raina jumped up from the table, noticing that Roxy was back in her outfit. No need to worry. Joffrey cooled his stepsister's ardor, noting that Eden can be trusted and he will figure everything out perfectly. And what could this conversation be about? Especially since Eden didn't know Roxy, or rather, didn't know anything good about her, so he had no idea what it could be about. You don't know me? We've already met, twice. Roxy was surprised, But what was even more surprising was that she had already managed to make so many mistakes in the 2 days she had been in this house that even the servants knew her stupidity. I am Roxy, Raina's older sister, Roxy Homewood. The girl introduced herself and tried to smile. Even though she actually thought the men in this family were extremely rude, it didn't matter now. Okay, Lady Roxy, what do you want from me? Are you unhappy with something? Eden asked, deciding that the girl wanted to complain to him about something. Roxy thought he was trying to make fun of her with this question, or maybe he didn't understand anything, just because he was stupid. Well, okay, no big deal. It was time to go on the attack. I heard you don't have a fiancé, and I don't think you have anyone in mind either, so I'll let you. Roxy then paused dramatically and tried to hug him around the neck. Marry me. Roxy finished her sentence. Eden's eyes widened in surprise, like 7 kopeck coins. A bride and marriage were definitely not in his plans for the near future. Roxy looked into Eden's eyes with great hope. Was he really going to say yes now and her life would change for someone? Ha ha ha. Eden laughed out loud. No, he just roared. Maybe it looked rude, but he found it so funny that he just couldn't hold back. The eldest daughter of the Count offers you an opportunity. Watch your behavior, Roxy said through gritted teeth. Although Eden's behavior was unpleasant to her, she still hoped to receive a positive answer. So, all this time you were chasing the Duke of Cornwall and were rejected. Then you proposed to my brother and were left with nothing. And now you want to marry me. It's quite sudden, and besides, I'm the second son. Eden began to explain, clearing his throat after a sudden fit of laughter. Well, you said it yourself. You are the second son. So you know better, and I am ready to drop everything and marry you since you dare to talk to me like that. Roxy was indignant, her eyes narrowing. This Roxy is so selfish and rude, and she doesn't hesitate to look down on others. It must have been very hard for Raina to live with such a person. A real snake. One can only sympathize with her future husband. It seems you haven't changed a bit since the festival, not to mention this in your habit of stealing, or should I call it your nature? And you haven't worked on it at all. Eden scolded Roxy, just like a father who has done something wrong to his daughter. But it's all because of Raina. This tramp deceived me. Zrania Roxy tried to blame her younger sister for everything, but even then it was no longer interesting. If you continue to blame others and talk nonsense, then I'll go. If you have free time, then you'd better apologize to Raina. Eden was about to leave, but Roxy did not back down and decided to tell him something interesting. The thing is, from Roxy's point of view, the Dispenser family was originally supposed to accept her main daughter, with a higher education, refined taste, the ability to play musical instruments and other bonuses and additions. But instead, again from Roxy's perspective, the Dispenser family took in a simple servant fit only to carry a bucket of slop around, Roxy shouted after the departing Eden. Well, if she is not destined to get a groom, and therefore the Dispenser family money, she will do everything possible to ensure that her, the younger sister, does not get anything either. Eden turned around. He couldn't stand such filth directed at his new half-sister. His eyes blazed with rage like torches, and he was determined to put this upstart in her place. You seem to be very jealous of Raina. Eden came close and leaned over Roxy like an avalanche ready to fall at any moment. Eden poked Roxy in the shoulder with his finger, just like his brother had done the day before when she proposed to him. It seemed that the siblings had identical communication styles. Instead of stealing your sister's dress that I gave her, why don't you apologize to her and try to learn something good from her? Eden said each word as slowly and clearly as possible, so that Lady Roxy finally got the message. What do you mean? I bought this dress in a boutique. Roxy began to protest, looking quite comical as the dress was clearly not her size. Did you know that I personally made this dress for Raina? Unless you want to be a clown at the party, just like at the festival, if not, you should return the dress to your little sister. Eden dotted all the I's. Roxy screamed, losing her temper again. But Eden didn't care. He thought the girls should be grateful that they were hiding so much. Meanwhile, the card game continued in the gaming room. Eden returned, jokingly noting that his friends had been having too much fun in his absence. What took you so long? It seemed like the only one online noticed Eden's long absence and was worried about where he could have disappeared to for so long. Oh, nothing serious. I had to walk a guest who got lost on the way back. Eden smiled. Wow, what's that next to me? There was a huge pile of chips on the table. The girl hadn't wasted any time and had already won a considerable amount of money. Tell me about it. She said it was her first time playing, but look how she corners me. The Duke of Cornwall was the most successful gambler and could not accept the fact that he was being beaten by a newcomer. Oh well, Raina just got lucky in a few games in a row, and she was sure that she would not win the next game. In that case, the Duke asked to deal the cards to begin that very next game. Can I join the next game? Here comes the Homewood family. Like the damn dragon Garinish, you only have to chop off one of his heads, Roxy, and two new ones immediately pop out. This time they brought Maurice with them, and judging by the breathless father behind them, they were not just in a hurry. They were running as fast as they could. The Duke's disdainful look showed that he was, to put it mildly, not happy with the new guests who were following him here and there and giving him no peace. I don't think I know you. Of course, the Duke had heard of the existence of a son in the Homewood family named Maurice, but he had never seen him in person, and he was not in the habit of sitting down at the gaming table with strangers. After Maurice introduced himself, the Duke realized that he was Lady Raina's older brother, but instead of talking about his sister, he began to talk about how good he was at gambling. How boring it was, the Duke just sighed heavily. My son is quite young, but very talented. I hope you enjoy his company, the father confirmed. When he approached the gaming table, it turned out that his dimensions had increased so much that Felix had to back away. What a pity, but there are already enough players at the table. He again politely refused the intrusive guests. And then Catherine became active Homewood. She tried in every possible way to interest the Duke in meeting and subsequently communicating with her son. What are you doing, Raina? Get up already. Catherine Homewood grabbed her daughter by the hand and pulled her out from behind the table like a fresh radish from a garden bed. What are you doing? Felix stood up from the table so abruptly that Walter had to jump aside. This behavior of Catherine Homewood was already going beyond the bounds of decency. The Duke and Felix exchanged meaningful glances. This disgrace had to be stopped, and it had to be done immediately. That's right. Card games are for men only. You were already rude enough sitting at a gentleman's table. Raina's father continued to press his point. I can't let Raina just walk away from the game. She's taken a lot of my money, and I need to get my money back. The Duke replied, subtly hinting that the Homewood family would finally leave him alone. But instead, Catherine Homewood burst out like a thundercloud, giving her daughter the world's fiercest glare. It seemed like there was going to be a scene. Don't you dare answer me. Stop being stupid and give the Duke his money back. Now, Catherine Homewood shouted. Enough. The Duke slammed his fist on the table and silenced those around him. This is so ridiculous. Do you really think I care about a few shillings? He was very offended by the fact that Homewood considered him as petty as they were. It's just Raina not knowing her place. It's just Raina behaving inappropriately. It's just Raina something else. Raina blah blah blah. Of course, Homewood. They tried to blame all the blame on their daughter, but the Duke was not interested at all. Get out. One word from the Duke put an end to this ridiculous performance. He was losing patience. He had just turned down Roxy, and now they were pushing Maurice on him. Well, really, how much more can you do? And take my vain and hypocritical family with me, the Duke added, which completely threw the family off track. No one expected such rudeness towards them, but to be fair, it should be noted that they asked for it. Homewood finally turned around and left the premises, as always, not understanding why they were being chased with a tattered broom. Homewood. This word already made the Duke feel sick. At first, Roxy, a naive Chukchi girl, believed that the Duke would succumb to her charms and marry her. Now the dumb Maurice was trying to be his friend, despite the fact that they had about 0 topics of conversation in common with the Duke. After the Homewood family finally disappeared, Felix first asked if his fiancé was okay. Of course, Satan was okay. She smiled tightly, just a little surprised. The Duke, in turn, could not just sit and watch as his friends came into conflict with the Count's family, especially when they had already treated Raina so unfairly. Felix clenched his fists. He was ready to immediately rush after them and properly teach these impudent Homewood a lesson. But Raina cooled his ardor and insisted that she would settle everything herself. I'm sorry you had to see something so unsightly, but I want to talk to them alone and receive an apology in person. I hope you'll believe me at least this once." Raina's eyes lit up with a fire that showed her fighting spirit. Dispenser brothers could only watch as Raina turned and walked away from her careless relatives. She had something to say to them. The Duke clutched his head. He realized now that he shouldn't have lost his temper, but it was too late. He had hoped that they wouldn't pester Lady Raina about it. Eden doubted whether it was worth letting the girl go and deal with her relatives alone, while they, the men, would sit and do nothing. But the older brother assured him that everything would be fine. He saw the fire in his bride's eyes and trusted her completely. This is not what Catherine expected. Homewood, she was wiping away tears, and from her point of view, everything was going well until she introduced Maurice. Homewood family left the Dispenser mansion in full force, except for all were depressed and realized that they had nothing more to do in this place. "Mom, wait!" Raina suddenly appeared on the scene, wanting to have a heart-to-heart talk with her parents. The girl looked up, gathering her courage. It was now or never. She would finally tell her parents everything she thought about them and their behavior. Raina's fault. That was the point she was trying to make. Homewood shouldn't have been so pushy in the first place. They should have gone to their daughter and she would have introduced them to the Duke. But Catherine Homewood just smiled. From her point of view, it was so ridiculous. She called her daughter stupid again. Catherine Homewood turned to Raina, completely covering her with her black shadow, and asked in a sarcastic tone, "Who do you think you are? You are a maid who worked in the kitchen. What can you do?" "You are nobody," hissed Catherine Homewood. She considered her daughter incompetent to conduct their family affairs, much less to be a mediator in dialogue with the Duke. "But we were a family all this time. I put up with all this because I wanted you to look at me and comfort me just once. I put up with so much. I wanted help. That's all I wanted." Raina screamed, her patience snapping, ready to incinerate her parents that very minute. "How dare you raise your voice at me?" Catherine Homewood swung her arm to hit her daughter in the face and show her her place. But Raina intercepted her hand, preventing her from hitting herself. She had already suffered enough humiliation in this family. Cold sweat broke out on Catherine's face. Homewood. Could it be that her daughter, whom she had considered stupid all her life, had given her a worthy rebuff? She certainly hadn't counted on such a turn of events, Raina said. And these were not just words. These words were filled with resentment and disgust, feelings that her biological parents were currently causing her. "How dare you answer me?" Catherine Homewood pulled her hand back, and there was much less self-confidence in her words now. Regret replaced the passive aggression in Raina's eyes. She thought she could understand her mother, but it seemed she was hopeless. Catherine Homewood winced and lost her wrist, which had been hurting badly after Raina had parried her blow for the first time. "We don't need your help or the Duke's," Catherine said as she left. Homewood Raina thought to herself that now this woman needed perhaps the help of a psychiatrist. "We're leaving, Maurice. Your father has already prepared everything for you. We don't need to deal with these nasty people." And she left the yard with her pack. It was so hard. Raina breathed a sigh of relief, but nevertheless she managed. She said everything that had been bothering her all these years, and the fact that her mother still didn't understand anything was no longer her concern. Raina thought she had changed, but to her mother she was still the same useless daughter she had always considered her to be. Oh well, it was no big loss, because now she had a new family. Well, something did change. Now the sight of an angry mother no longer frightened Raina. She was no longer afraid. Now she treated her former family with regret. Left alone in the yard on this warm evening, the girl looked with inspiration at the threshold of her new home. The home where she was valued, loved, and respected, and now she would go there to rest after such a busy day. "We are finished. This is beyond humiliation. What do we do now?" And panic reigned. Catherine Homewood nervously circled around the chair where Roxy was comfortably seated with a bottle of wine. Roxy's nervous laughter, drunk as a skunk, got on her mother's nerves. "You once told me not to be greedy about things I can't have." Incidentally, that's exactly why her mother told her to seduce at least one of her sons. Raina's fault? Roxy screamed so loudly that the walls of the room bent. Of course, she blamed her little sister for all the troubles, and even if there had been an alien invasion, from Roxy's point of view, it would still have been Raina's fault. "Stop whining. Tomorrow when you sober up, you better come back with at least one offer. Try harder. They own many companies. I'm sure they can spare one for Maurice, too. Catherine Homewood was not going to give up and was once again going to throw her eldest daughter into the breach. Roxy's head was already spinning as she thought about how much the Viscount was splitting his business and how she could infiltrate his family. But none of her plans worked. And there was a good reason for that. And the reason was that the Viscount wanted to give everything to Raina. But Catherine Homewood did not yet understand the seriousness of the situation. In that case, if Roxy joins the family, Catherine Homewood was willing to bet that one of the companies would go to her. But they don't want me. The reason they sent the marriage proposal in the first place was because they wanted Raina. Roxy lowered her head, wrapping her arms around it, as if she had entered a parallel universe where she and her younger sister had switched places. Oh my God. Catherine Homewood at first did not believe that the scenario in which someone wanted to marry her clumsy youngest daughter was possible. But no big deal. And in this case, she immediately came up with a new plan. Why didn't you tell me earlier? It seems Raina can still be useful. Should I send her something to help her give birth to a son? Catherine began to think out loud. Homewood, because in that case, if Catherine Homewood will do something for the Dispenser family, for example, send them a gift, or at least shower them with compliments. What can I say if he starts licking the seed of Eveling? In that case, Dispenser will do something for her too. Meanwhile, in the house of Dispenser. Entering the house that had already become her home, Raina grabbed her head because her thoughts were not fitting in. She experienced dual feelings. On the one hand, she managed to convey to her mother the unspoken thoughts. But on the other hand, her mother did not understand anything. In any case now, Raina must pretend that nothing happened, to avoid unnecessary questions and awkward answers and other inappropriate dialogues. The groom and his brothers immediately surrounded the girl with endless questions about whether she was okay, whether she was in pain, and in general, how everything went. And only the Duke remained in his place. He was already pretty tired of the vanilla scenes in this family. Felix and his brothers looked like puppies waiting for their master. Well, of course, Raina was completely fine, although the difficult conversation with her own mother had exhausted her considerably. So now it would no longer be possible to continue the game. Well, it's okay. You can play another time. At these gaming tables, the ladies of Raina are always welcome, especially the Duke, who wanted to win back so much. I'm sorry that my family ruined the mood. The girl felt very awkward and even ashamed that such a misunderstanding had occurred. Felix's face sank, deeply saddened by the thought that Raina still called these people her family, even after what they had done to her. Felix recalled the heartbreaking scene when Raina's real mother had come to her new home uninvited and had been less rude, trying to force her away from the gaming table. Felix's heart sank at the sight of such flagrant cruelty, and yet Raina had continued to call this rude old woman her mother. Raina, it's not your fault. You have nothing to apologize for. The most important thing is that you're okay. Felix spoke very softly and slowly so that his bride would understand that she had nothing to blame herself for. Felix looked at his bride as if she were a hypnotic talisman. He could endlessly be touched by her childish naivety. The younger brothers confirmed that the absurd scene that had taken place was not her fault. Joffrey was especially indignant, insisting that old Catherine Homewood is the only one who should apologize. Everyone was genuinely worried about Raina and worried that she would not get hurt. The girl broke into a bright smile. She was really okay, honestly, because she has such a wonderful family here. Lady! The maid's voice suddenly rang out in the hallway. Jane was in a hurry. She was running towards Raina at full speed. It seemed that the girl was not destined to rest today. She was just heading to her room when she bumped into a breathless Jane, who was in such a hurry to her. In her hands, Jane held a red dress, the same one that Raina had given to Eden, which her older sister had stolen and, paradoxically, had put on to try to seduce the same Eden. Looked out the window, Raina, she saw how Roxy got into the carriage. Was she really leaving? What a relief. Goodbye. With the brothers to seduce gone and the stolen goods taken away, Roxy had absolutely nothing to do in the Dispenser estate, and her expression was like she was suffering from flatulence. Raina's hand automatically rose to wave goodbye to her older sister, but the girl thought better of it, because the day before she had tried to talk to her mother, who had never understood her, so there was no point in talking to her sister, who was her exact copy. Jane knew that the girl was depressed because her mean sister stole her dress, so she took it from the thief and brought it to Lady Raina. Later, she will patch it up and the dress will be as good as new. Clutching the dress to her chest as if it were a living person, the girl raised her sad, bright eyes and decided that she needed to apologize. Jane's gaze, in turn, created misunderstandings. Apologize to whom? Raina doesn't mean that she wants to apologize to her evil sister. No, of course. Raina meant to apologize to Eden. It was his gift, but she couldn't even take care of it properly. She hoped he wasn't offended. Raina was very attentive to details. Jane noticed it right away and really appreciated it. But in this situation, apologies were unnecessary. The maid had a much better idea. Instead of worrying about apologizing, make plans for dinner with him, Jane recommended. But the said dinner had to dress up all the gifts that her new family had given her. Jane was sure that everyone here would be happy to see the girl in such a form. On this upbeat note, the liner went about its business and waved goodbye to Jane. Not the next day. Raina was rushing around the huge house looking for Eden. But suddenly she found something else. Or rather, this something else found the girl. It was Catherine Homewood. And oh, what a surprise, it was Raina they were looking for. Despite the fact that yesterday she had been banished from her home and sent to where the sun doesn't shine so brightly. A lot happened yesterday, I think we need to talk, Catherine chirped. Homewood, however, Raina didn't think so. However, Catherine Homewood simply blossomed and smelled, so Raina, without wanting to, succumbed to its charms and settled down next to her on the sofa. Noticing that Raina was in a hurry, Mom asked where she was going. The smile on her face looked like a rubber mask from a cheap souvenir shop. I was looking for my family, the girl answered in an even tone. Your family? Catherine Homewood wondered if her daughter really meant these dispensers. So they treated her well, especially since Raina was currently looking at her blood mother as an enemy of the people. Raina in the face yesterday was now stroking him, expressing regret. We should have treated you better, my dear good girl. I know you've been through a lot, Catherine said at these words. Homewood, Raina's eyes grew to the size of 7 kopeck coins. It was weird. Roxy wasn't bullying her sister anymore, and her mom was giving her the attention she wanted. Mom was saying things Raina wanted to hear all along, but even so, she wasn't happy. Hugs Catherine Homewood were strong, but not at all like Eveling. If in the arms of her new mother the girl felt warm and cozy, then when she was hugged by her own mother, she felt both cold and suffocated. She even caught herself thinking that it would be more comfortable if Homewood openly hated her, as usual. Joffrey arrived just in time and literally pulled the girl out of her mother's suffocating embrace. The case was very juicy, and Joffrey had also been looking for Raina since the morning, so he asked the girl to follow him. Go ahead, don't pay any attention to me, an old woman. Catherine laughed. Homewood, thinking only that this lousy brat had ruined everything again. She was incorrigible. I'll talk to you later, Raina. The girl's mother waved after her as she walked away looking like she'd just been pulled out of a burning house, hoping that there would be no more conversation. As soon as Raina and Joffrey left the living room, Catherine's face, Homewood, had regained its former shape, which was filled with contempt for everyone around him, greed, and a small pinch of intelligence. Maurice was supposed to be the successor, and Roxy was supposed to enter the marriage market. They were both useful. They were. But now they were as useless as a goat's milk. Compared to the older children, Raina was a useless, annoying child, and practically dead weight to her own mother. But oh, Raina, she's become a very useful daughter now. And Catherine Homewood caught herself thinking that she was truly proud of her youngest. Raina, meanwhile, was still shaking from that crude embrace and even stranger dialogue. By the way, Raina and Joffrey had already arrived at the place, and the girl was impatient to find out why they were in such a hurry. Had another new guest really arrived? No guest. In fact, there were enough old guests to spread on bread, but the matter was really juicy. And Joffrey asked Raina to go into the large hall. Meanwhile, in the great hall, a whole family council had gathered. Apparently, Dispenser couldn't solve the problem, and they needed Raina's opinion on the matter. So now that the whole family is here, we can continue. Everyone has worked so hard, so Eveling would like to hear each family member's opinion on upcoming vacation. This is the first joint vacation with Raina, so the Viscountess was expecting proposals. The lake! I like boating, so let's go to the lake. Joffrey jumped up excitedly. However, Eden thought that you could have a good boat ride in the ocean, too. The ocean. Yes, that's exactly what you need. Raina was literally fired up by the idea. She had always been curious because she had never been to the ocean, but she had read a lot of books about it. In that case, the best place on the ocean shore, in the Viscount's opinion, is Freeze Mare, in the north. It's decided. That's where we'll go. And here came the Duke. Of course, he did not participate in the family meetings, but he had urgent news. A very important person will be arriving here very soon, and the Duke has come here to personally introduce her to everyone. Catherine Homewood swaggered into the room with a smile so wide it looked like the skin on her cheeks was pulled over her ears. No, of course not. Catherine Homewood is not the person the Duke introduced. In any case, it's very brave of Catherine. Homewood show up here. She seemed to have forgotten the Duke's warnings, who, looking at her, cleared his throat with obvious innuendo. Oh, I'm so sorry for my harsh words that time, I really am. I know it wasn't necessary. We are a family. After all this, the mother tried to hug her daughter, but it looked like a snake was wrapping itself around the poor rabbit. A new carriage arrived from the Rothesay house, and a man with a serious look and fiery red hair stepped out of it. At the sight of Rothesay, the eldest son of the Duke of Rothesay, Catherine Homewood lit up like a torch. She was sure that Mr. Rothesay wanted to chat, but the Duke has requested that he be accompanied by Dispenser as host, so the family meeting will be held another time. Nervously biting her nails, Catherine Homewood thought they would agree right away if she asked nicely, but that's not the case. Raina and this family are not as simple as she thought. Lounging in her chair and sighing loudly, Catherine Homewood decided that it would be no use if she was the only one making an impression. Her husband disagreed because he worked hard too. Really? Catherine Homewood was eager to find out what he was working on there. It turned out that Walter was thinking about a new business. He slept and thought, ate and thought. But what business opportunities could there be? Catherine reproached her husband if they had just missed the chance to meet the Duke, who could have become Maurice's best friend and Roxy's faithful fiancé. Or better yet, both at the same time. Let's just go home. Stop trying to please people. This time it will work out. Walter had run out of patience watching his wife's futile attempts to infiltrate the family. So they left the Dispenser mansion. This time, for good. Besides, Walter was absolutely sure that he had struck gold, and the new business would bring him a huge pile of gold if he just waited a little. It would be a very big deal. So they left the Dispenser mansion. This time, for good. To Felix's surprise, the Duke also decided to leave the Dispenser mansion, but promised to see him later. The bride and groom watched the Duke go. Despite his sometimes eccentric behavior, they would miss their friend. It must be a truly urgent matter. If someone from the Rothesay family is looking for the Duke without other nobles, then it must be something related to the Emperor. Rothesay threw himself at the Duke with embraces, just as he had at Felix a few days earlier. Rothesay was late, but he didn't see anything wrong with that, because he wanted to surprise everyone, and he was sure that the Duke had already guessed the purpose of his arrival. The fact is that the Duke urgently needed to go to the capital, and Rothesay arrived specifically to accompany him. In that case, the Duke guessed that His Majesty was suffering more than he thought. Rothesay nodded gravely. They didn't have much time left. Well, it seems that this is the end of the Duke's vacation. He took his leave, thanked everyone for the warm welcome, and left the Dispenser mansion. The guests had finally left, and all the members of the Dispenser family felt tired, as if they had just unloaded a train containing Ruta. Everyone came here so quickly and left just as quickly. Raina is also a little tired from such a tense reception, but she will miss some of the guests. The most important thing is that the star of the party, Duke Lloyd Cornwall, left, and Felix and Eden breathed a sigh of relief. Now everything is fine and he can finally focus on his family vacation. Joffrey was already looking forward to meeting new adventures. Even though he had just come from the academy and would have to return as soon as his vacation was over, Joffrey did not want to stay at home. Everyone will remember this vacation, and Joffrey didn't want to be left out either, especially since a boat was already waiting for him, moored on the ocean shore. Raina was also looking forward to the upcoming holiday and was very excited because she would see the real ocean for the first time. Well, okay, the whole family will have fun together and even go boating with Joffrey, but Joffrey will be the one doing the oars, naturally. We haven't even left yet, and we've already loaded the unfortunate Joffrey with work. But what can you do? Being the youngest of 3 sons is not an easy fate. You have to always be ready for people to make fun of you. Evelyn came into the room, handed Raina a piece of paper with a list, and asked her to look at it. I wonder what it was. This was the list of servants who would be traveling with the Joffrey family, and Raina had to look at it and make her own adjustments. Eveling had thought about doing the usual and choosing the servants to go on vacation based on age, but the family had not been on vacation for a long time, and there were too many people willing to go. So Eveling wanted Raina to choose who to take. Raina already knew. The right to choose was a great honor for her, and she was glad to take advantage of it. But the girl did not doubt for a second who exactly she wanted to take with her. In that case, it would be Jane. First of all, Raina would like to relax with her maid Jan, who helped her with everything, and gave her a tour of the huge mansion, and endured a blow from her older sister when she did not let her into Raina's room, and a dress that tore when the aforementioned older sister tried to pull it over her lush seat. Eveling smiled. And who else would you like to see in your circle? And they began to choose further. So this is what it feels like to know that someone cares and respects you, trusts you, and holds your hand. It feels good. Wow. The carriage hadn't even gotten close to its destination yet, and Raina was already in raptures. Her eyes were shining like two morning suns, and her golden hair was fluttering in the wind. It seemed like this was going to be a wonderful vacation. Eveling watched her new daughter. She was worried that Raina might be seasick, but everything turned out to be fine. The girl looked out the window and admired the view like a little child. Eveling thought it was very cute. And indeed, Raina could not tear herself away from such unprecedented beauty. And she also remembered the gift that the Viscount had given her on the eve of her departure. Ah, you should take this. The Viscount handed Raina a professional painting set, including a palette, paints, and a huge number of brushes of different diameters and bristle densities. The view there will be stunning. The Viscount smiled. You have been working hard lately during your vacation. You need to rest and paint whatever your heart desires. There is also a large market there, so you and Felix should go. And remember, we are going on vacation, the Viscount instructed. The girl did not object. Thank you, Mom, Raina said, not taking her eyes off the beautiful scenery passing by the window. Mom. The most important word in every child's life. Did Raina really call Eveling her mom? It seemed she had finally crossed over to the bright side. How nice that was. Eveling's heart sank. A bright and dazzling smile never left Raina's face. She was sure that she would remember her first vacation for the rest of her life. By the way, the carriage had already stopped. Well, here we are. The ocean, a landscape that never gets boring. The blue sky smoothly turned into the sea surface, and the sun reflected in it so brightly that Joffrey had to cover his eyes. It was time to get her feet wet in the water, but Raina was in no hurry as she wanted to help the others unpack their luggage first. Come on. This is your first time on the beach, let's go, laughed Joffrey. What luggage? It's not going anywhere. We can unpack it tonight and tomorrow. By the way, about the luggage. A breathless woman darted past from behind. Jane, with a menacingly huge suitcase. Jane, you should go too, Raina said, taking the maid's hand, but she seemed in no hurry. Oh, I can't. I'm already grateful that I could accompany you, Jane replied, clutching a suitcase that was almost bigger than she was. The splashes of water that doused the girls instantly washed away all the seriousness from the maid's face, but the water was warm, and they laughed. The first thing Jane did was find a huge shell. It was very beautiful, and if you put it to your ear, you could hear the sound of the ocean. The beach is so much fun to play on, but the sand is very fine and constantly gets into your shoes. Someone's shadow blocked Raina's face. The girl was the first to run to the ocean, so she had to be caught up with. And this someone finally got to her. It was Felix. He immediately dropped to one knee as if proposing marriage and, realizing that the bride was uncomfortable, began to take off her shoes. Raina's legs were so tiny that her foot could easily fit in Felix's palm. The sand is very small, so it easily gets into shoes. But if it is uncomfortable, you can just go barefoot. And there is no need to worry because this is not the first time Felix has seen his bride barefoot. By the way, the groom was also worried about this, so he took off his shoes. Now everything was fair. The ocean. A landscape that never gets boring. The waves beat like a talisman and tried to reach the new guests to wet them properly. The sun made the water and sand sparkle, creating bizarre pictures like in a kaleidoscope. And the sand was white and clean as a cloud. Now that the girl was barefoot, Felix asked her to step forward. Raina's little foot sank into the water. The water was very warm and refreshing at the same time. A very unusual feeling. The lovers continued to admire the water surface, breathing in the refreshing ocean breeze. They did not even notice how the rest of the family left, leaving them alone. Raina's face appeared more and more often. It was natural. The girl looked very happy. Felix thought that Raina was very tired because the party was a lot of work, and now he regretted that he had not brought her here earlier. But from that moment on, the groom was going to show his bride even more beautiful places. But what could be more beautiful? Felix's hands covered not only his eyes, but also half of Raina's face. He led her to a special place that was supposed to be a surprise, but it was too early to look. 1, 2, 3. Now you can see Felix's hands and the girl's eyes wide open. Oh, yes. Raina couldn't say a word from delight, and it seemed that she had entered heaven. Felix guessed perfectly with the place for the date. The girl could stay here all her life. Wow, wow. Gradually coming to her senses, the girl realized that she was in the middle of a huge square, surrounded by beautiful houses, most of which were shops. It was a market, and it was so big that the girl's eyes ran wild. She hadn't even expected such a scale. But where should she go first? Raina was confused by the number of shops, so Felix suggested that they first walk around and look around. However, the girl again caught herself thinking that it didn't matter where she was. The main thing was who she was with. This was far from the first time that the bride and groom held hands. But why was her heart beating so fast? Felix was again enthusiastically telling some romantic story, but noticed that Raina was not listening to him at all. Oh. The girl raised her clear eyes. She was just thinking a little. How about going inside? They had just come to a shop that sold everything for drawing. There are so many beautiful flowers here. The sight of bright colors, crayons, pastels, and other essential attributes of a real artist inspired me to paint new pictures. Take a look around and put everything you want here. Felix carefully handed over the basket. It was time for shopping. Colors that resemble the ocean, the blue sky above, and the sand under your feet are just what you need. Thin brushes, which were exactly what was missing from the set that the Viscount had given me the day before, are perfect for finishing small details of any landscape. And finally, the canvas. The young artist had never seen such a textured canvas before. She wondered what it would be like to paint on it. The girl was so impressed that she didn't notice how she swept half the accessories off the counter. Perhaps that was too much, but there was a big problem. Raina didn't have any money with her to pay for all the purchases. She wondered if she should borrow money from her fiancé. Meanwhile, the groom reminded her about the textured canvas that the bride had been looking at for so long, but apparently forgot to take in the end. She thought so hard. Of course, to paint good pictures, you need a lot of paints and quality canvases. How awkward it was to ask Felix to buy her all this. I don't think I really need all of this. The girl lied timidly, while her eyes continued to run over the counters. I'm paying for everything, the groom insisted. Don't worry and just take whatever you want. Felix seemed to be in good spirits today. Although, judging by his sincere smile, he was always very generous. But there is so much here. Raina seemed a little shy. She was already doubting whether they would have enough money to pay for all the purchases. But Felix insisted that he would take care of all financial matters. After all, let's not forget that he is the future husband. Felix's blue eyes were as beautiful as the ocean, and for a second the bride felt like she could drown in them too. Going to the checkout, Felix asked to wrap all the purchases and not to forget about the purple paint, which Raina also looked at for half an hour but was embarrassed to take. And one of each type of canvas, please. The girl's knees buckled when she heard Felix buying more canvases, despite the basket already being filled to the brim. Felix, this is too much. Raina couldn't resist. It seemed to her that the supplies she had bought would be enough to draw the whole world. But the husband was already carrying a full box of purchases to the carriage, in which, in his opinion, something was still missing. So he asked the bride to look around better and buy everything necessary. In fact, Raina now had more than enough drawing supplies, and she asked the seller how much it all cost in the end. This shop had a selection that you wouldn't find in other shops. The salesman smiled. The total cost was only 20 florins. 20 florins? That's a fortune. That's 10 years' wages for an ordinary worker. The poor girl couldn't accept that much. Now Raina was ashamed that she, without wanting to, had tricked the groom into paying her such a monstrous sum. But there was nothing she could do. Everything had already been paid for. I can tell what you're thinking just by looking at your face. Felix suddenly appeared and whispered, But the girl was lost in her thoughts again and didn't notice him approaching. I'm not giving this to you for free. The groom's index finger rose up. Because there is something I would like from you. A painting. It doesn't matter what it's about. Felix wanted to hang a painting of his fiancée above his desk so that it would always remind him of his beloved. Of course, Raina could paint a picture, and more than one, but it would not be worth 20 florins, however. Felix believed that the artist was clearly underestimating herself. Then you leave me no choice. Felix opened the wide door and, gently hugging the bride by the shoulders, led her out into the street. From this moment on, you're going on a date with me. The groom's blue eyes sparkled like the ocean, reflecting the sun at sunset. The setting sun, meanwhile, illuminated the next stop on the lovers' rendezvous. It was a pastry shop with snow-white walls and equally white flowers at the entrance. The girl was filled with delight again. She could not contain her emotions because it was the first time she visited a pastry shop. Felix was sincerely glad that his future wife liked this wonderful place. Of course, she always wanted to visit such a shop. Thank you very much. Cakes. Lots of cakes. All sorts and sizes, decorated with cream and strawberries, and also pastries, cupcakes, and sweet cookies. Everything looked so delicious that the girl didn't even know what to choose. Raina knew she couldn't eat everything, so she had to choose just a few treats. But what exactly should she take? Maybe the groom would give her a hint. In this case, the lovers chose a lemon cake, sweet, but at the same time sour. They promised to serve the treat with invigorating green tea. This is such a cute place. All the cakes are so delicious, and the interior is so beautiful that you could live here for two. So many goodies. The girl ate everything and was now worried that her dress might soon rip. Will your dress really rip if you eat too much? The groom asked worriedly. No, of course, I mean when I eat a lot, my belly starts to stick out, the girl explained. And it can ruin the dress. I don't want to talk about it. Oh my God, what am I saying? Please pretend you didn't hear me. Raina felt a little ashamed again. Did she really think of saying that out loud? Felix laughed. In fact, he was just joking. He really liked that his bride was always so honest with him. The girl's cheeks flushed and she looked away. But let's not forget about the rest of the family. So why not take some cakes for everyone else? It's such a wonderful idea. Eveling, for example, prefers coffee. So a coffee cake would be ideal for her. Soft and polite Eden will be delighted with a strawberry cake. And sweet-toothed Joffrey will be delighted with a basket filled with cakes and muffins. Very good choice. Raina, without realizing it, has learned the tastes of all family members. Dreams. Sitting in the carriage, the girl anticipated how hard and with what inspiration she would work on a new painting, which she would dedicate, of course, to her future husband. Knock, knock. And here comes Felix. He packed all the purchases and was ready to go back. And he came back pretty quickly. Well, how much time passed? 5 minutes or 10? It seemed like an eternity had passed. The bride had already managed to miss him. This is the most fun shopping I've ever had. Thank you for being with me. She smiled so brightly that it seemed that it was she, and not the sun, who was lighting up the square with her smile. Looking at the charming smile of his bride, Felix saw more and more new colors, and of all the smiles, this was the most beautiful for him. Night came. Raina slept sweetly in her soft bed. She was so tired after such a busy date, but she felt like the happiest girl in the world. But a sudden lightning strike and peals of thunder broke the sensitive sleep of the happiest girl in the world. She opened her eyes. The rain was so heavy and the lightning was simply blinding. Surprisingly, when she and her fiancé were at the market, the sky was completely clear, and there was nothing to indicate such a storm. Curled up in a ball, trembling with fear, Raina covered her head with a blanket, trying to hide from the terrible thunderstorm. But really, it was okay. It was just rain. She shouldn't be afraid of rain. But it reminded her of those times, about the terrible times when the thunderstorm made her ears go numb, and her legs did not hurt from the unbearable cold even in summer. Those nights when no one could help poor Raina. But this is not her current reality. Now she is safe in a cozy room and her brave groom is guarding her peace. Gathering all her will into a fist, the girl got out of bed. Enough trembling. It was time to face her fear. In fact, all you have to do is just close the window. As soon as I moved the shutters, everything stopped. So quickly, as if nothing had happened at all. A lonely lighthouse on the ocean shore illuminated its gloomy surface with its bright and clear spotlight. It seemed to disperse the clouds, and this made the soul feel warmer. What a fascinating sight. Wow, it turns out that even the most terrible elements can be beautiful in their own way if you watch them in the right mood. Raina shouldn't be afraid of something like that anymore. Everything has changed since then. Together with the window, she closed her past life, and now she could see anyone. She just had to leave the room. Her hand itself reached for the same paint, dark blue, almost purple, which the girl had forgotten to put in the basket. But the groom noticed this and bought it, and the night inspiration consumed the young artist. The paints fell on the canvas in broken strokes, and it seemed that this would be the most important painting in her life. Morning came, and the first rays of the sun illuminated the guest house on the ocean shore, waking up its new inhabitants. Having learned from bitter experience, Felix knocked on his bride's door so as not to catch her in an awkward position, or half naked, as he had managed to do the day before. But no one answered the knock, so the groom carefully, on tiptoe, entered the room. But instead of the bride, he was met by a huge canvas. Raina painted last night. Her hair, face, and nightgown were stained with paint. She must have stayed up all night to paint. So Raina was drawing something important. Felix thought. Putting his thumb to his chin, he seemed to understand what it meant. Dispenser family gathered at the breakfast table, almost all of them. The only one missing was Raina, but Felix asked not to wake her, as she had been up late the night before, drawing. Oh, the Viscount immediately perked up. He was already impatient to see his daughter-in-law's new work. According to Felix, this painting was mysterious and beautiful at the same time, and at the same time very different from previous works. The Viscount was genuinely glad that Raina had found something she enjoyed doing. Just thinking about how much time she had to spend not knowing about her talent hurt her new parents. Eveling began to have high hopes for Raina. She dreamed of her becoming a professional artist, but in reality, Eveling was trying to fulfill her dream through Raina. Alex noticed this and caught his wife. She knew about it herself, but she wanted the girl to devote more time to the business. You never know what will happen. Raina is free to change her mind. Isn't it dangerous to say that? Who knows, maybe she'll change her mind about the groom. Eden smiled. But Felix knew that his bride thought only of him, of her future husband, because he also thought about her so often, worried, and most importantly, felt it cannot be explained in words. You need to fall madly in love to understand. But it seemed that he had found a kindred spirit. Now Eden laughed. The middle brother's tone was so ambiguous that it was unclear whether he was being serious or joking, but in any case, he was merely pointing out what had already been said. When three brothers gather at one table, the atmosphere becomes explosive. The middle one smiled smugly, the youngest thought he was a little strange, and the eldest turned away altogether. The elder howled like a wolf at the moon. In his opinion, Eden was not just being a little weird, but was being downright a complete idiot. It was getting close to lunchtime. The sun's rays were getting brighter and were already touching the roof, strolling on it like lovers on the central square. Finally awakening from a long and deep sleep, Raina assessed her painting with fresh eyes. The gloomy ocean under the black sky symbolized her past life, full of fear and despair. In turn, the lighthouse on its shore with its bright light dispelled the darkness around, and finally, the dawn turning pink on the horizon symbolized the beginning of a new, beautiful, and amazing life. When Alex saw his daughter-in-law's painting, he couldn't hold back his tears. How well she tried. It seemed he saw right through Raina. There was a letter attached to the back of the painting. The girl didn't notice it right away because she was admiring her work. I wonder who it was from. I had to leave first because of some business. I just can't be with you until the end. Perhaps we will arrive home on the same day when I finish my urgent business in the capital. I hope you will have many good memories. The text of the letter read. It was from Felix. Postscript. I looked at your painting and was surprised at how amazing it was. Even Felix saw this work, but Felix left for the capital. It was the first joint vacation of the bride and groom, and now he will be gone for some time. But that didn't mean she'd never see him again. Now she needed to get herself together and enjoy her further rest. Jane, the inspired girl, ran out into the corridor in search of the maid. She had grandiose plans for today. Calm, silent wind fell like a white seagull to the bottom. The water reflected the clouds and sun rays like glass. Between all times, without names and faces, we no longer expect the breeze to wake up. the breeze that had already begun to sway the palm branches. The girls walked towards the ocean breeze, filled with inspiration, carrying a canvas and an easel Raina, paints, brushes, and other accessories. Jane tried to place the easel in the most visible place so that the artist could see the landscape as well as possible. But she would look correctly not at the landscape, but at her new friend. Oh, what's that? Is that a crab? With thick armor and huge claws, Jane was scared out of her wits. Meanwhile, saddened Alex watched through the window as his friends spent time outdoors. He really wanted to join them, but Eveling was against it. She believed that the Viscount would only disturb the girls with his presence, so she grabbed him by the collar and dragged him to the kitchen to drink coffee. A look filled with love, warmth, and tenderness. That's how Viscountess Eveling looked at her new adopted daughter. After all, if the child is happy, everyone around is happy, and especially the mother. Ringing laughter, and Raina flooded everything around, just like warm ocean waves. She laughed so loudly and sincerely for the first time in all this time. Jane sat nearby and played with the crab. It seemed they had managed to become friends. Moreover, during all this time, she and Raina were not just a servant and mistress, but became real best friends.